Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're your gruesome twosome, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And here we are back for another edition of Overlapping Dialogue. This episode, episode 74, we're looking at the cinema of 1994 as we continue to go through the 90s. And we've been
There's 93 in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 1993.
Yeah.
94 is next episode.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I'm already wanting to jump ahead. 1993's Groundhog Day and Fearless, both terrific movies in very different ways. I'd say they're both some of the more spiritual movies of the 90s. Mm-hmm. And they're both
in totally different dispositions.
Yes. And I think Groundhog Day especially is a deceptively spiritual movie. I mean, if you just hear the premise, you don't necessarily assume that that's what it's going to be. Fearless is more explicitly in your face about it throughout the duration of the movie. But both terrific films. Again, Groundhog Day kind of has a pretty big pop cultural footprint. Fearless a lot less so. I think that's one of the, not one of the movies that people, when they first think of the 90s, think of Fearless, I don't think. But I think it definitely deserves to be way up there in terms of a movie that is talked about, which is why we're spotlighting it today.
One thing I'll say, the first time I ever heard of this movie, because there's also that Jet Li movie, Fearless, which is called Jet Li's Fearless. Yeah. That way it's not confused with this. I once was watching the Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie, which is they did This Island Earth. And there's a part in that where they're in like a plane or something. And one of their comments is, our in-flight movie, Fearless, or something, which it had come out around that time, so that's why they made that joke. But I was like, I thought they were talking about Jet Li's Fearless, and I was like, okay. And then finally, years later, I saw this movie, and that joke made sense, and I started laughing. I was like, your in-flight movie is about an air disaster. Crash. Yeah, but anyway. So that's the most I've heard this movie ever mentioned by anyone.
Yeah, so, I know there's we can get into this later, but there's a growing fandom for Peter Weir, I know online among cinephiles.
For some of his more obvious movies and sort of lesser known.
But this isn't one that's usually brought up among that, which I think is baffling to me because I think it's his best film. And he's made some other really good quality stuff. Yeah. But
this or Picnic in Hanging Rock, but we'll get that later.
But before we get into that duo, we gotta pull up a chair. We just gotta dig into that Blue Plate special.
Hi, Audrey.
Norma, have a cup of coffee, please?
Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
Hey, who wanted to watch pepperoni? Coming up!
Your big Groundhog Day smorgasbord is right here. Meanwhile, Jeff Bridges is over there eating a strawberry, choking to death. Anyway, not at the beginning of the movie, though.
I had kind of forgotten about that scene in Groundhog Day where he's just like, well, who cares about anything anymore? And he's just like eating everything he can in the diner, chowing down big time. You gotta wonder too, and we'll get into the logic of that movie in a little bit. Like, at what point would you get sick and tired of the food there? You know
I was
what I mean?
thinking about that because I was like, I mean, there are other restaurants in the town, I would assume.
That's kind of the centerpiece.
But it's like, that's where he keeps going, and so you'd think, that like, I don't know. But I was thinking that at one point, I get tired of eating the same stuff.
Speaking of get tired of eating the same stuff, comic book superhero movies today.
Mm-hmm. This is something, I guess, because we need to reintroduce the segment that, Kyle, you are burning on.
As we begin our look back, here is what I am burning on.
Our old friend Jim Rome.
Yeah, we haven't done this. I don't even remember what we talked about the first time we did
do
this.
Stuff like this all the time. We just forget.
Right. Because we get mad about plenty of things and rant and rave about plenty of things. So the new Flash movie, I think it's coming out. It's coming out the weekend that this episode will have dropped. Okay. I believe. I think it's for us recording this on June 3rd. I think it's next weekend. Yeah. June 9th, I think it comes out. Where to begin with this movie? Before we even get to my real true outrage, which I want to build up to for a while, this movie, I mean, we've talked about it here and there over the course of its production. What a dumpster fire, what a disaster pit, what a piece of utter garbage this has proved to be. Everything about this movie, from all the associated Ezra Miller brouhaha that has happened off screen in the midst of its production and post-production. The fact that this movie seems to be Frankenstein beyond belief.
I think it really does represent
insane to me.
The DC EU at its breaking point. Like, this is it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know that they'll make any more after that. I don't know. Because it really does seem like a total bankruptcy of imagination. Like, it really is another level of, we have no idea what we're doing. We've had no idea what we've been doing since Man of Steel. We have no clue what
really the only up.
They just really don't know.
I feel like really the only unambiguous success they've had is the first Wonder Woman movie. Was generally liked. We only saw it really the once, but we liked that first one at least. Other than that, I mean,
because then they've had the Batman, which is its own thing.
That's in a whole other category. So there's been a lot of things, and Joker was its own thing. Is Aquaman not technically part of all this stuff? It's in the I'm saying DCEU. Yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, but I'm saying.
Joker. Yeah,
well, I'm talking about things
Academy
that are
Awards.
Separate from that. That now they're honestly getting bored, and they're like, all right, let's just give you what you really want. And even though I didn't like Joker at all, that is what Joker fans would want out of a movie, I think.
It at least also was its own thing.
Yes,
it was allowed to exist as its own thing.
I hate that movie and what it stands for, but I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a Joker movie. I feel like that's true to what it should have been, it wanted to be.
Yeah.
The Batman's obviously great, so that's this whole other thing. But yeah, they really don't know what they're doing. I think the biggest representation of that just disorganization all across the last decade.
I think in its own way that this movie is gonna, because it delves into the multiverse and multiple characters and whatnot, that I think it's gonna represent for them a little bit of a breaking off point or a jumping off point to kind of shrug and say, well, since all these universes are colliding, we're going to do this in the future, we're going to do that. And I think kind of sort of unofficially that James Gunn's Superman movie that he's developing is going to kind of be this breaking away from that and being its own thing. And the Batman already is its own thing, obviously. Joker's its own thing, which they're working on a sequel to the Joker as well. And we've talked about in the past Michael Keaton coming back as Batman, and we're huge Michael Keaton, Tim Burton Batman fans. You want to do your iteration of it? Yeah.
Let's get nuts.
So taking a line that had
see this, but my eyes were like
a line that in the original movie had such life and insanity is reduced to this monotone, funeral droll of a reading, which is what this whole thing is. I mean, at a certain point.
What's funny about that scene is that it's one person. It's like, how can we outdo Jack Nicholson? And it's like, we're going to take it here, okay? Because for all things considered, the Joker has not reached that level in that scene yet. He's playing it relatively more calm, as much as that can be.
Yeah.
And then this and it's like he's like, wow, like, this guy is crazy. Like, you know, so it's like a matching of wits literally happening on screen, not even between characters, even like actors.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen here.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, it's fan service as possible. And yeah,
so we're taking Ezra Miller Flash, who recently over the last week, Andy Muschietti, the director, has said stuff like, there's no plans to recast Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller has done a great job in this role. We're not about to change that, whatever.
Which is just insane considering their off-camera behavior, which you only need to barely look up to find, because we won't even litigate all that here. Yeah. But that's another thing I wanted to mention before we get too far into this, is that Andy Muschietti is the director of this, which is, I think, other than everything that's terrible about this, one of my least favorite aspects because of how much I loved his It movies. To the point where it's like, man, really? You're doing this now? Like, it's just not that he's ever done anything that great. I know you saw Mama years ago, which you said was fine or whatever. Yeah. But, like, it just is a shame to see somebody take an IP like It and do so well with that. And then, now it's just whatever. Like, I'm just going to be part of the machine, you know. Well, as if that wasn't, as if you weren't already part of the machine in some sort of way with adapting Stephen King.
Did you know to any extent, too, that Michael Shannon's Zod is basically the villain in this?
Yeah, I've seen that a little bit. I really have just done my best to just not pay attention, but I've seen some of that where it's like, what? Like, you know, yeah. I think we've talked about this before, I think on air, but that the problem ultimately is, and I know why they're doing this, because we'll get to that in a second, but that you've said this a bunch, that The Flash, who I am by no means necessarily a fan of, I literally don't care about Flash either in a positive or negative sense. I would tend towards the negative, if anything, only because I'm just like, really, that's his superpower, is he moves fast. Okay, well, Superman can do that, so whatever. But with The Flash, it's like, really, the first Flash movie has to have all of this context surrounding it. Now, part of that is because, as has been established in these previous movies, the Flash can travel between these universes because he can move so quickly.
When he channels his force, speed through the Speed Force is what it's called. Right. That is like the strings between worlds that can bridge.
Which whatever.
And this is kind of in our indirect way adapting Flashpoint comics from about 10 years ago.
They should have just made
which were used as the basis for the reboot that happened with the New 52.
Well, they should have just done a Flash movie and then do this as the sequel. That would be more acceptable to me. But the fact that it's going to be so insanely top heavy on Batman.
Yeah.
There has been enough as somebody who loves Batman, there is more than enough Batman art out there.
Yes.
Already.
And co-sign all that. Yeah. We could take a 20-year hiatus on Batman. And
we could take a century hiatus on Batman.
I mean, there's been already 2 full-length animated Lego Batman movies. Lego Batman is its own thing now.
I forgot there was even that second one. That's right.
Yeah, I didn't even see that one yet. So
I saw the first one, but yeah, I mean, it's just... it's weird because it's very troubling in everything I hear about it. I'm like, oh wow, this sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also just don't care whatsoever. It actually is liberating to not worry about that.
Mm-hmm. And as a huge DC Comics fan, I'm there myself. Mm-hmm. I've been there for a while now. But a piece of news unveiled itself. And now this is actually, I've been looking in the past. This has been a rumor for over a year now. And it's
really
only
recent.
It's kind of been on the down low.
You know why
I don't frequent comicbookmovie.com as I used to on a daily basis as I did years ago. So I'm not.
Well, the reason why is because what we're about to talk about, that character is no longer as famous anymore, and so people are going to care more about, look at all the Batman that are in it, rather than this.
So, and I want to reiterate, the elements I'm about to talk about are apparently in a small / cameo lens, so just keep that in mind, okay? There are rumors, strong rumors, that have been, I won't even say are really rumors anymore. There's enough people who have seen versions or cuts of the movie, then these reactions have made their way onto Twitter from people both connected to kind of comic book movie machine and people that are not, that are more critics and based or journalists, film journalists, that not only is there apparently a George Clooney cameo as Batman, as of course he played Batman and Robin, not only apparently does Linda Carter, who of course played TV's Wonder Woman back in the 70s.
I hadn't heard that. But by the way, just to interject, one of my favorite details about Inside Edition is their obsession with Wonder Woman.
Oh, right.
Watch, anybody who doesn't watch Inside Edition, watch 1 week. I kid you not. 1 week of Inside Edition every night, only 30 minutes apiece. You will find at least one reference to Wonder Woman in some form, and they will use the Linda Carter Wonder Woman music in there.
And then sometimes her like doing the spin around.
I swear to God, at least a month.
Well, that show is also notorious. Anytime they have any opportunity to show a clip of a TV show or a movie, they will jump at, and something that has nothing to do whatsoever with.
It's like, you remember that? Like, do I remember TV's Wonder Woman?
Yeah.
No, because I was not alive, but you have made me remember it. And I mean, I knew it existed.
Or like some very brief 45-second UFO story. It's like, did E.T. phone home? And it's just like, and then it'll have like a clip from E.T.
and then right here or something. But anyway.
Now, let me just say, both of those people, and it is good to have a little demarcation point here because it's going to take it up to a whole nother level here in a second. Both of those people, George Clooney and Linda Carter, are both living. Mm-hmm. And so they have at least some form of agency to sign off or say, yes, let my likeness or be used, or let me even shoot something very small for that. So there is a demarcation point of that. Now, do I think it's dumb and ridiculous that that's even being pulled into this? Yes, but they have at least the agency to be alive and make that decision for themselves. We're building up to it. I get it. Now, over the last so many years, there have been a lot of various controversies with regards to CGI versions of deceased individuals or de-aging. I think, when Rogue One came out back in 2016, I believe that was, there was a lot of conversations about Grand Moff Tarkin being in the movie, of course, looking like Peter Cushing, and the controversies of that. Now, at the time...
And Carrie Fisher was alive at the time.
At the very end of Rogue One. Yeah. She had just passed away right after that, though. It was like eerily right around that time, I remember. Now, at the time, I was like, I didn't see or understand why so many people got mad about this. Yeah. I was like, well, it's kind of cool. Like, you're seeing Tarkin in the movie. Now, these years later, and I've thought more about this stuff, I do think there's a lot of cause for concern for using deceased individuals to be put into your dumb new Star Wars movie just because, it's Grand Moff Tarkin. And that leads us to the final resting place in a variety of ways for a great many things. Adam West and Christopher Reeve. Adam West, of course, plays Batman in the 60s show. Christopher Reeve, of course, played Superman in the 70s and 80s movies, are apparently going to make CGI cameos in this movie. This blight on cinema that is the Flash. What's your initial reaction or response to hearing that these icons, these people that are well known and associated with these characters, are going to be jammed into this already jam-packed dumpster fire of work of cinema?
I'm glad you let me go first because you're going to be more of the venomous on this. Not that I don't agree, but ultimately and I want to go here because this is the obvious place. Now, they've been trying to make this movie for a while, and it's been known they're going to make this movie since Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Like, it's been a long time. That's been since 2016. I mean, that's been a long time ago. And quickly, even though that movie was bad, I feel like the height, truly though, of the DCEU was the Wonder Woman theme in that. Which is, I wish they would use that on Inside Edition and not the Wonder Woman, but, just for a week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just for a week, they take a break from their regular Wonder Woman usage and then do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, they've been trying to make this movie forever. There was also so much. I remember all of this, and you probably remember this. I don't know. All of this controversy surrounding Justice League, the Justice League movie, and that Zack Snyder movie, and the Snyder Cut, and all that. And what was so funny about that, of course, was, and I never saw Justice League. Actually, I never did see it, so I don't know.
You're what we call the spared.
Yes, like
it's like a tribe of people that need to be protected at all costs.
It's like, I didn't do that because I had better things to do.
As in literally anything.
Anything at all, like stare at the linoleum on the floor. That's what I did. But yeah, that with that movie, what was so funny about that too, about the Snyder Cut, was that there wasn't a Snyder Cut. They had to go and shoot more things.
Yeah,
that's not called a cut. That's called adding things. It's very simple.
Yeah,
there's this thing called addition and subtraction. Usually, subtraction happens in the editing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't go up.
Movies always come down to the editing.
But, yes, that's what I know. All the real action in a movie comes in the editing room. You know, not the writing, not the acting, not the filming. None of that matters. It's the editing of all of those things that wouldn't exist without the things. That's what matters, is the editing of them. Mm-hmm. That's what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
Because to edit, you don't have to have all those
things.
Yeah,
because it turned out David Lean, he didn't actually shoot Lawrence of Arabia. He just arrived in the editing room one day and it was all magically there, and he just decided to edit it together.
Same thing with Passage to India is what I've heard.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that at one time was a version of this where they were like, we have no idea what we're doing, and you know. Now it's gone on a while, and the newest version of this is the reason this movie exists now, basically, is what I'm trying to get to after all of that nonsense. But hey, look at where we are. Is that they had the Spider-Man No Way Home, which had all these people to come back, and you know,
specifically you had the old Spider-Mans, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield,
and then you had some of their villains,
Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, I think Jamie Foxx as Electro, I think also Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, I think was in there too.
Probably, but so this is only really happening ultimately because of that. Even though I feel like they were more on the uptick on that of wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Because like we've said before, DC is more into the multiverses than Marvel is, ultimately.
Yet Marvel beat them to the punch, both with No Way Home, but I would even argue, go back a little further with Into the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it
Into the Spider-Verse?
There's the first one.
Yes.
And then now the new one that's just out is Across the Spider-Verse, right?
Something
I think.
Like that.
But that really is the beginning of this huge wave that we've had.
And so...
of the whole multiverse concept in comic books being applied.
And by the way, will we be seeing Across the Spider-Verse? No.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to say on that real quickly, I do not like the animation style of that, the way it looks. I think it looks ugly. Like, I like the first one. The first one was really good. I know it's kind of overrated now, like everything is, except for Fearless. But, which we will get to eventually, don't worry. This just looks awful. I saw the trailer. I was like, this looks really ugly looking. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Let me just say, there's a lot of people who think it's really cool and different.
Yeah.
New,
no, it's different.
You know,
I respect that about it. It is definitely something else. But something that is new is not always great.
Right, yeah.
Like the GOP, the Grand Old Party. Well, sorry, the Tea Party.
Yeah.
That was new for a little while. It was like, nah, I'm good. But thanks.
Like, as new as in 1770s new, I guess, you know. Like
Tea Party. No, I mean the new the
2010
The 2010 Tea Party was like, ooh, look at this.
Yeah.
It's like, this is trash because it's Republicans. But anyway, but so now we finally get to this after all this time. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether or not you had the idea forever. You didn't
realize it, yeah.
And so now... And this also is connected to the Space Jam movie, which we talked a lot about yet never saw.
Mm-hmm.
We were also spared on that one. You were part of that group as well. But that, and now it's just, what all can we slam in there for fan service? Like, I know we talked about that with these newer Star Wars movies, back when those were coming out, like Force Awakens, especially, and about fan service. And then even Rogue One, speaking of that. But now we truly have entered a new level of fan service of look at these things which is interesting because
ends up becoming a Where's Waldo of spotting Easter eggs.
That's not what movies are supposed to be. Movies are supposed to be about story and experience. This isn't even a ride. If it were a ride, it would be the Hall of Presidents or something, but not at all interesting. Or including a Trump, Hillary Clinton animatronic. Like this, it's just really stupid. I mean, it literally is Hollywood at its laziest.
Well, I think this, in many ways, is the end result of a certain era of comic book movie. I do think, not to say I'm rooting for the genre to get back on track, because I kind of don't care anymore. This cannot sustain itself forever. There will have to be some turning of the page.
There's going to be a
renaissance
at some point. Yeah.
There's going to have to be something different. But again, and I agree that this whole multiverse concept has been building up for some time now. And again, as a DC Comics fan, I don't read DC Comics as much as I used to, but I've read plenty in my day. And because Levi and I were talking about just today about the whole multiverse, he was saying, was so stupid, and I totally agree. Usually it's more bad than not. But there are some good, worthwhile examples that can be tapped. However, like with anything else, it's just going to be, look at this, look at that, rinse and repeat, just do, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, there's enough to be outraged about that. And here's where we're finally at our resting place. We're not the biggest fans of the Adam West version of Batman. We love the movie, the 60s movie. The show, we're a little, whatever on.
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve is Superman. Okay? There have been good versions of Superman here and there that are not Christopher Reeve. I'm going to say it one more time just to make sure you understand. Christopher Reeve is Superman. Okay? So, to take his image, to take his likeness, and pervert it, and in any way throw him into this dumpster fire that is already going to inevitably have a certain destroy the legacy of Michael Keaton's Batman. Not totally, but it's going to be this asterisk that every time we watch those Tim Burton Batman movies that we love dearly, we're going to be like, at least there's going to be at least this little mini asterisk of, well...
Not if I don't watch it, there won't be.
Well, but even knowing it exists, this Flash thing will be that was the end result
I guess,
of
but those
that
movies
continuum.
Are so,
I mean, they are this idiosyncratic
I think culturally that's true. I think personally, I'm too connected and dialed into those movies to ever... And we'll see.
But in the larger popular memory, that will be connected to those.
But I mean, screw that because everybody's
in the same way, the fact that there will even be a link or a footnote or anything on the Christopher Reeve Wikipedia page that connects it to this garbage is beyond insulting. It is a desecration. It is an abortion. It is a terrorist attack on the legacy of Christopher Reeve Superman. I don't know how many more things I can point to say with this.
I think this is more damaging towards that, clearly, than Batman, because of the popularity of those movies even is greater than the Christopher Reeve, the Richard Donner, and Richard Lester movies. I think that's going to be ultimately more damaging, sadly, to those movies than this. And it will have even less airplay than that will. I agree, because there have been so few Supermen on film. Henry Cavill was a fine enough one.
Brandon Routh from Superman.
Is Brandon Routh going to show up?
There's a rumor that maybe about him.
Well, I would just assume.
He also has appeared as Superman in the some of the CW shows as like a Kingdom Come super futuristic version of Superman. So he's already dipped into being a meta version of it.
Yeah, that one's really weird though too, because Superman Returns is technically a sequel to the first Superman.
First two,
right? Or the first two. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, therefore, it's wait, so that is Christopher Reeve, but not. This whole thing is so screwed up. But that's fine, whatever. Nobody remembers that movie anyway. So, it's... But, and even, like you said, even for all the bad things about some of the sequels of the Superman movies, the original Superman movies. He is Superman, and he was, I would assume, even for like, and I know the second one is good, I've heard. I still have not seen Superman 2, which is kind of crazy.
Or 3.
No, but I have seen 4.
Yeah.
Which, but even for Superman 3, which is supposed to be terrible,
Well, it's not good, but it's a whole other line of what a bad movie is in the 80s compared to what it is now.
Let's just shove Richard Pryor in here.
Yeah.
Let's shove a bad Superman in here, and it's just
it at least has imagination about its badness.
Yeah, right. But with even for all that, Christopher Reeve, like I said, is Superman. This also is insulting just by nature of the fact of Richard Henry Lee? Question mark? Christopher Lee's final years and his accident and all those troubles he went through. Even that adds another insulting factor to this to me. Because
I did like him in Smallville, and that, because he was in that as a character, but I mean, it was very clearly him and his wheelchair.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just saying
that was a character, but in its own way was not.
You're not only taking someone who is dead, but also someone who had this unfortunate
tragedy,
kind of last half of their life, ultimately. And that you're just going to do that? I mean, it's just all for money. I mean, that's what this is all for.
They would say, we're paying tribute to him.
No, that's not what this is.
Blah, blah, blah,
it literally is, you like thing, come pay. And it's like, and like I said, and I know you're such a massive Superman fan, so none of this is for me to disparage the fandom of Superman. But when you're already dealing with specifically those movies, which already have so few fans by now, who are you appealing to there with this one? It just, even the Lynn Carter Wonder Woman has fans on the Inside Edition.
I'm trying to think about the logic of why they would do this. I think there's a weird, and this is true of a lot of modern Hollywood, there's a weird inadequacy problem they feel. And they feel this need to tie themselves directly to the past legacies of these things that, my dad liked this or said it was good. Like, I'm not as familiar with it, but I want to feel included in the legacy of Hollywood. And undeniably, Christopher Reeve Superman is within the levels of the legacy of Hollywood and what it means. So I think it's this weird inadequacy complex of, we can't think of an actual beginning to end single shot story to do with these characters. So let us just jam in these past versions of them as any way to make us feel adequate about our present inadequacies to tell a story beginning to end. There's this weird obsession with connecting to the past because you have no complexion of what a meaningful future for yourself is. We see this sort of cynicism in politics all the time. We see this cynicism in culture all across the board. This is just yet another version of this cynicism of, hey, look at this. Look at this thing from the past. We're huge lovers and fans of many things from the past, but guess what the past is? It's the past. I can go back and watch those things. Why do I want to see Christopher Reeve injected into this? If anything, I want his memory as far away from this sort of thing as possible, because I don't even want to see any connection whatsoever between what he meant and represented and what basically fugitive criminal Ezra Miller represents for The Flash in 2023. I just don't understand why those two things need to be the least bit intermingled. I don't understand.
It's almost like the way I could kind of describe it. It's almost like watching a pirated movie where they haven't zoomed in on the camera, and you see almost them sitting there watching the movie on the screen rather than just going and watching the original thing. This movie's like watching the Burton Batman movies like that, like on a pirated version. It's like that, but if, back when they used to, like, on Nickelodeon, when they would show a movie and they would have all these little facts at the bottom, almost like a commentary with the movie. It's like that also.
We've been building
because it's like enough new little things, but like,
we've been building up to this for a while, but weirdly, when I talk about this movie or think about this movie, I think about, this is a really random place to go, like when you play the Grand Theft Auto video games, or you watch BoJack Horseman and what they say Hollywood is, and it feels so like, nah, that's not quite what it is. Come on, Sundance exists, the Cannes Film Festival exists. There are a lot of great filmmakers who are still out there making movies. Come on, it's not the biggest, dumbest thing. Here we are. We finally reached the point where these other things have kind of parodied for years about what Hollywood culture is. We're there. We've reached a certain end of this continuum of garbage that has been piled and piled and piled and piled. You know, I'm big fans of Sidney Lumet, and his book about making movies is one of the great books about movies, period. And I know towards the end of it, it was, I think, published in the early 90s. And he was talking about, like, these movies today, you know, Batman Returns, I think was specifically a movie he named. And I think Robert Altman, in a wholly other context, talked about, like, Jurassic Park or some movies of the early 90s. And so
that was
this whole notion,
Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, I think was where that was.
This whole notion that Hollywood is as bad as it's ever been, you know, that's been something. I mean, you go back to the late 20s, early 30s, they were saying about what sound was going to represent for movies, you know. So this is not a new complaint. Let me just get any ambiguity out of the way. Movies, in a big way, are as bad as I can ever think that they've been. When it creates and fosters something like this that's going to be in any way the least bit successful. Does that mean that there are not great movies being made today? Absolutely not. There are a lot of great movies that we're excited for. There's going to be a period in July where there's, like, you know, we're going to have a new Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie. Now you could say, well, that's just some big dumb action movie. Like, those are really well made, really great. And then also Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. So there are things on the horizon that. Well, I'm semi-interested in seeing Barbie. I know you're not.
Am I interested in seeing Barbie?
Yeah.
It's called Hell Yeah, but no.
We're gonna eventually have a conversation about that movie and what it means for some of these very same problems. We'll have that at a later date. But so there are things on the horizon that do give me hope, right? Jonathan Glazer has a new movie out this year. That alone gives me hope that cinema will subsist and survive. Scorsese, of course, has. So when I say that movies are as bad as they've ever been, don't think that I'm saying that there are not great movies still out there being made. There are. But what the hell? What is this Flash movie? What does it represent?
Well, also, this movie's being released in the midst of the writer's strike that's going on in Hollywood right now. And that whole idea of, can we just get AI to write movies?
Well, this is what happens. This is what, I mean, not literally, but unofficially is what happens.
So both of those combined,
that's the atmosphere of all this.
Definitive disaster for Hollywood, I think. Because for a little while, up until the last about 2 months, honestly, I was a lot more optimistic.
And there have been some really great
about
things
Hollywood
this year,
since COVID, due to an increase in, I think, numbers of going to the movies, and also of, you know, just viewership in the theaters has gone up some, and also just the types of movies that were being made.
Beau's Afraid was released in a multiplex in Hickory, North Carolina.
And I really don't think that those things are quite as dire as we might make them sound in the immediate, but I think eventually that will just become more and more of a problem as AI just gets worse and worse. I mean, did you see here recently on Twitter they had put together these videos of, like, John Lennon, like, talking about the song Imagine, and it was like an AI. Did you see that?
I don't think I did, no.
It was as bad as you could imagine it being. It basically looked like Harry Potter, but John Lennon, sort of, and it was like the most basic John Lennon voice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the way people talk about this stuff is just so weird, because it's like you can so tell that's fake. You know, you can see right through it. I mean,
there's been a lot of these AI things done with Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson makes Lord of the Rings.
Now that's kind of interesting to see an image of that. Yeah. But I get it as this is just a joke. I'm moving on now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And Wes Anderson does Star Wars, all this stuff. And a lot of people, rightfully so, were bashing this idea and saying, no, like, you watch a real...
new Wes Anderson movie, too.
And which has been getting great reviews, and we're really excited for that coming out this month, so expect to hear about that soon. But, like, you cannot... there are all these things that are, quote, Wes Anderson-y. Yeah. There are always, even in the movies we don't necessarily love, unexpected things that no computer can come up with. You know why? Because it's not a human being, and it doesn't have the brilliance, the biases, the problems, the artistry that a human being can create. Okay, so...
I see computers as similar to that of animals, and I think of it in the same way. Is that and why I'm I'm a spiritual person because I was raised as a spiritual person, but also what I think about is the difference between human beings and animals is the creativity of the mind. Now, yes, can animals create certain things? I mean, like, yeah, they can move sticks around or something. I don't know, but that's the difference, I think, and also that human beings have souls and animals do not. I think that's pretty definitive. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't agree with that, but whatever. They're all kooky weirdos anyway. So, yeah, I think it's the same thing where it's like the human mind cannot really be replicated because it was created by God. So, therefore, can't really make a computer do those things. And guess what? If you do, who made it do that? A human being, which has a mind that can make things do. So computers can't make computer. Eventually, it's just, no. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you don't know. Things have advanced so much. It's like, no, I feel like there are basic things about humanity that cannot be, we still don't understand the human mind. Do you think we can make it one? Like, yeah, it's all just stupid, so. That you'll all see.
But again, about the Wes Anderson thing real quick.
Yeah.
Like, you take a movie like Grand Budapest Hotel, which there are certain aspects that I like. I don't totally love the movie. I respect deeply what it's trying to go for. You just think about, like, the weird Russian nesting doll structure of that movie. No computer would come up with something like that. You know what I mean? And, like, I'm not even totally sold on it works.
Yeah.
But it has the faults in a lovely way that a human being creating and structuring a story would
it's
have.
like how Tom Wilkinson's character in that is like yelling at the kids behind him, like, be quiet, and stuff like that. It's like, you don't get that.
Wasn't he like the older Jude Law? Who's barely in the movie anyways. But
yeah. But it's like I said, that's too weird. Like
like Saoirse Ronan having a birthmark of Mexico on her face, like, which annoys me.
That kind of does seem like something you'd see in a computer, but
I don't know. But so
now, if it were Panama, that would be something else.
Now you might be thinking, how do we get from talking about the Flash to talking about AI? I think it's very smart that you brought this up because it's all the same. It's the same problem.
Yeah.
Let's just throw something together. Let's just rinse and repeat, copy and paste. We live in the copy and paste era. If anything, that's what the 21st century is going to probably be known as, the copy and paste era. Now, whether or not we're going to hit Control-Alt-Delete on the whole thing, we'll see about that. We don't know yet. But again, there's a very clear, direct line. I'm glad you mentioned that about AI and the writer's strike because. And this goes all the way back to the early history of Hollywood. Irving Thalberg had one of the great quotes of all time, which I don't agree with what he's saying here, but it tells us a lot. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of, the writers are like the most important forces in this industry we have. Never let them know that. Never tell them that. And that's literally where Hollywood is right now, where it's like, oh, actually, we think we can do this on our own. Oh, wait, it's made by a computer, if literally and figuratively. Well, who cares? I care about stories human beings make. Even if human beings are fallible, even when human beings make mistakes, I'd have a story over a human being 100 out of 100 times before I'd want a computer to tell me a story. So, there you go.
The computer that wore 10
That's
shoes.
The Flash coming out June 9th, by the way. It'll be on the date of this.
If you see it, you're going to hell. So... Yeah, not necessarily, but...
Not necessarily.
Don't worry, God forgives all sins.
But get to praying after.
But you better be prayed up, as Mark Wahlberg once said. Yeah. Did you see it, by the way, that whole ad that he had, it was like around Memorial Day, was like, we got your back, or whatever. It was like, like, what? Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Whatever
yeah,
that
yeah.
was, and it was just, and he's like, I guarantee, and it was like it stayed on him a little too long. The shot, and it was just like, is this gonna end or like?
Speaking of endings,
he is somebody that genuinely scares me.
Yeah, he's
like
probably gonna run for office one day or something.
Oh, yeah. That'll be Patriots Day indeed.
Yeah. Speaking of endings, Succession.
Oh yeah, because first of all, let me say I have not watched the last season of Succession because I had literally anything else better to do. And this comes off a season that was fine, but no.
You've been where were you at, like Succession season 1, and how did that change over the course of the show? For you?
I loved the first episode. A lot of people didn't.
A lot of people, the kind of the wrap on the story or the show is, it took halfway through the first season for it to, quote, figure out what it was, which a lot of people say about a lot of shows. And then ever since, kind of by the end of season 1, it's been definitely a certain thing, a certain vibe. And you've been less on board with that since.
No, I liked it better when it was goofier. I liked it when it was more Adam McKay.
It didn't take itself so seriously.
I liked it more when it was The Big Short, which I'm not even that crazy about as a movie. It's fine.
Yeah.
Adam McKay gets a really strangely bad rap these days, which I don't really understand. I know that movie Don't Look Up was supposedly not good.
We're both big fans of Ice.
There's a lot of movies that are supposedly not good that people think are good. Yeah. So... no, Succession I find to be a very intriguing, often funny, whole bunch of nothing. And that sounds like that's what it was.
It's
by
essentially,
the ending,
over these several years, inherited the 9 p.m. HBO drama, like that, what that entails, right, in terms of whether it be The Sopranos or Game of Thrones, one of those appointment level shows. Do you know what its ratings peaked at this last episode?
2.9, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like right under 3 million people. Which I think a lot of Twitter was like, wait, what? It was that low? Well, everybody I know watches it, that whole kind of bubble thing. Let me just say, I've been a casual, half-hearted fan of the show, and what I mean by that is I've mostly liked it. I will say, by the last season, it became the show in many ways you were talking about, or not it became, but it confirmed that the show that it was by it essentially, spoilers here from here on out if you've not seen the show. Logan Roy, who is the patriarch played by Brian Cox, died early on, or about in the middle maybe, I don't remember exactly, of this season. Yeah, maybe a third of this season. And so that was kind of a shocking episode going into that.
Was that in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
When we were on a Nashville trip. I woke up, I was like, what happened? The old Logan Roy died. I was like, yeah, okay.
Succession, yeah. The name of the show.
It's funny because that kind of supposed to happen at the end of the first episode.
Yeah,
of the whole show.
Yeah, I've kind of totally forgotten about that, and our cousin Philip had been going back and rewatching it. He said, he was talking about all these things about season 1 that had been so glazed over and forgotten about, and nobody remembers anymore. And so then it became about the mad dash, who will be the next CEO. And I think on my most...
Which they've been doing the whole show.
Yeah, essentially. But it finally became real in a way that it was more hypothetical sometimes in the past. My glass half full version of the show always up to that was, well, it'll be about more than that. It can't just be about that. Then it just becomes a math problem, right?
Yeah.
Well, I do think overall this final season was pretty good. I do think this final episode, while it made sense where every character ended, was abrupt to say the least. And kind of was literally like the culminating climax of the show was happening in, say, like the last 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, it was right up to the wire in terms of how it will, quote, end in that meaningful way, And I won't say it's like one of the worst finales ever or anything like that. But it is one of the most puzzling, abrupt finales I've seen. Like I said, I think what happened to all the characters, where they end up, makes sense. Where Tom Whamsgam or Wham Bam, thank you, ma'am, whatever his name is.
Wham Bam, thank you, Spaceman, I think.
Space Jam or whatever.
Right.
He ends up as the CEO. And
Wham Bam, thank you, Space Camp Jelly Jam.
And I think that makes a lot of sense for as far as the journey his character undergoes and the relationship he had with Logan over the years. But the whole thing kind of added up to what I said. It was a math problem. It was like, oh, so this person was the CEO and these other people were not the CEO. Okay. Now, any criticism I have about any of this, let me just say, is wholly on another plane of criticism that exists for something like The Flash, because that's without any redeemable characteristics or features. There was a whole conversation.
That whole thing is kind of like what Max Cady once referred to as entering the ninth circle of hell.
Yeah.
The circle of traitors, that kind of thing. But anyway.
But there was a whole... you can weigh in on this too, as somebody who watched the first 3 seasons. A whole, should we, quote, root for these people? Or should we, quote, like, is it worth having a show about these millionaire, billionaire types when there's so many other stories to be told? Or is this just simply another prestige drama about the wealthy and powerful? What did you think about that as far as your own relationship to the show, as far as the worth of depicting people like that?
I always saw myself as more of an observer rather than...
You didn't have any sort of emotional connection to any of the characters, really. Yeah.
I thought they were funny.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I think Trump is funny, in quotes.
Yeah.
He's hilarious, actually. That's not a compliment.
Yeah.
I don't really like my politicians to be hilarious, by the way. Just so you know.
You don't want them to have a good, top 15 at the comedy store?
No. I don't want them
it's not important.
I don't want them to be on SNL and be like, used to call me on the cell phone. I think that might literally be the worst thing ever broadcast. And there's been a lot of awful things on TV.
There's that guy who shot himself on the air that one time.
Which one are you talking about? The guy that got in trouble for everything, or the guy that Brett Baer watched? No. Get off it!
I was thinking about the first thing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Where are we at? Oh,
should we care about a root for these people?
No,
is it the show's is it the show's at fault for even depicting these people? I would say no.
No, because there's shows like this all the time that our mom watches, similar to, that are like The Tudors or the Bridgerton or the Medici or all these shows about
palace intrigue.
Right. Well, it's essentially what this is. And a lot of people compare this to Shakespeare.
Yeah.
How dare they?
Yeah.
I think I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I think it is Shakespearean in its use of vulgarity, of modern vulgarity.
Yeah.
The way it's written is very, but it's very obviously that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's very, it's like it wants to be Sean or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, look at this vocabulary we've created. It's like what Nico Bellic once said. I go on my computer to play Mr. Richman, and whatever. But
I think any show kind of after a point settles in and quote finds its voice in terms of dialogue,
and that's fine.
And this felt very locked into that though in a way that never was dynamic to a point either. Yeah,
it's very FF Donkey Gang, stuff like that. Just
right,
right. But
I would just say I love Fisher. All my favorite characters in the show are always the wormy, the Fisher Stevens. I can't even remember. They're two old white guys.
Yeah, the guy that's the villain in Safe, and then the guy that is in Burn After Reading and United 93.
And there's Jerry, played by
J. Smith Cameron.
Yeah, J. Smith Cameron. Yeah.
But to me, the show, I feel was it its most interesting and yet its most obvious when they had the Eric Bogosian hearing stuff where they came before the Senate hearing on whatever.
Yeah.
And it felt very oh, okay, this is trying to be a whole Trump era show. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was looking at my watch and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's
there's a whole election thing went on this last season.
And that was a whole thing that was also similar about basically implying that Trump was the president at different points.
Yeah.
And then this was also in the aftermath of the whole Fox News. What's the name of the guy that was the head of Fox News forever?
Rupert Murdoch.
SOB.
No. Roger Ailes.
Roger Ailes, and it is about Rupert Murdoch.
Well, the family is,
too. But Roger Ailes and kind of that whole what is news media, and it's a lot of things I'm
toxic
profoundly
workplaces. Yeah.
I'm profoundly disinterested in. Just I don't know. It's like I feel this way the way that a lot of people wrongly felt about Vice. I think where it's like, well, I knew how bad it was.
Yeah.
I don't think you did. Actually, by the way, I don't think we totally all knew how bad all this was. Yeah. By the way. But you know what I mean? It's like people go back and say, I knew that I knew exactly that he was running everything. Yeah. It's like, no, I don't think that was that clear in the moment at certain points maybe. But yeah, it's like, so I feel that way about this where I'm like, yeah, I know how bad Fox News is. I know how bad the news media is. I have watched enough of it to tell. You don't have to be that smart. So it's kind of just taking that and then wanting to be this big operatic drama where people say poo poo pee pee and whatever.
FF Donkey Gang.
FF Donkey Gang. And,
Bore on the floor.
Yeah, that was the episode I remember watching in the moment and being like, what's going on? Like,
I will say, I think the best aspect of this show were the performances, the acting on the show. I think particularly, the guy who plays Tom, what's his name? McFadden?
Timothy McFadden or McFadden.
He was really great, I think, in one of the performances of the show.
Yeah.
I didn't really like at all Roman, played by Kieran Culkin, but I think the performance is very dialed in to what that person and character is. You know, Jeremy Strong, I thought was good as well.
He's good, but he kind of sleepwalks through half the show. There's kind of that whole middle point. His whole character, I just don't understand fundamentally. I liked him better the way he was in the first season, where he was like, at times would be that way and kind of show his true nature. Yeah. But other times would be all, destroying bathrooms, that sort of stuff. Like I was more interested in him at that point. Yeah. At a point he entered I'm going to sit by the pool and just deteriorate. That whole kind of attitude. I'm just so... Let me say also that I was more into this show as it went than I'm acting like I am now. But it got to a point where the new season was going to come on. And I was like, do I want to stay up till 10 o'clock on a Sunday night? A lot of people were like, what does that statement even mean? I work for a living. Mm-hmm. I don't know what y'all do. I go to work. I go to school every day and teach children. I don't really want to stay up till 10 o'clock on a Sunday night when I have to get up at 5:15 every day because I like sleep and like not feeling like a caffeinated booze hound, like everybody else. Whatever that means. Maybe that could be in the Succession spinoff show. They use that.
After party show.
Yeah.
After show party.
After Succession.
Yeah. It's like after MASH.
Yeah. Talking Succession. Talking Roy. I don't know. Waystar Royco.
Now, we were big fans of Connor Roy.
Yeah, I always liked Connor a lot better for multiple reasons. Number one, he was the oldest. Not that that means anything.
Alan Ruck, we love him.
Number two, it was Alan Ruck. And three, he was, even though he wanted to run for president, and that was kind of ridiculous,
that played
was
a role
the
in
most
this season.
different of the group.
Yeah, he clearly was
didn't
most
care.
Outside. He had a different mother, too. That was part of it.
Yeah. But so all this is just to say, I feel like we're all just talking in circles here. It's pretty
talking
big.
Roy.
But it's a pretty big bunch of nothing when I hear what the show ultimately ended up being, which is just like all these people are soulless and care about money. And I'm like, well, I knew that at the beginning.
It turned out to be the math problem. It was like, so-and-so did this for this person, and this person wronged this person here. So 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, that's the end of the show. I know this.
Kind of like what Game of Thrones felt like in a certain way by the end too. So.
And I've got 2 final thoughts. One, will we ever get to a show like Mad Men or The Leftovers again, where the emotional climaxes or catharsis are about either who am I, or will I believe the truth that this other person is telling me? Like, that's humanity. That's like novelistic, right? All these other things, even a great show like The Sopranos, the greatest show of all time, will Tony die? Which I know even David Chase was annoyed by, and in his own ways trying to get around that. Or Breaking Bad, like, will Walt live or die? There's all these live, die. Does this person get the job? Will Don Draper be happy?
Yeah, because
that was the fundamental question that was at the
will
root.
This relationship be repaired?
Right, and
because that's what I think about with that. It's like you think about what both those shows are about advertising in New York in the 1960s, and then The Leftovers, which is about the rapture in New York. Mm-hmm. Well, everywhere, but specifically starts in, say, New York. Those shows, okay, so one that is the first thing about Mad Men ends in a hippie meeting room in Big Sur, the emotional climax of that.
With only one character that
speaks.
Also one character that we've been with for most of the show. Everybody else in the show is literally only that one episode.
Yeah, and the guy who provides the
emotional catharsis
of that is somebody who is only in that scene.
Yeah.
Then you have with The Leftovers, these people getting back together after many years in a little house in Australia and talking about, am I lying? What happened to me?
Yeah.
It's just like, that's what storytelling is. Like you said, that's what humanity actually is. That's the thing that doesn't interest me, and I think why both Game of Thrones ultimately proved to be a failure and why this has proved to be a failure is because it's about the operatic side of things, the who will be in control. Well, guess what? Both in the sense of, and I know a lot of people say, well, that's not really how the world works. No, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about your realpolitik Henry Kissinger view of the world. I'm talking about
version of the world.
I'm talking about the real world, which you sometimes claim to live in. I'm talking about where human beings. Yes, sorry, you failed. You actually became human for 2 seconds. Now, I'm talking about the real world, which is where there are no longer kings, there are no longer companies that there are companies, but like I'm talking about real people. This is where things happen. Those things only happen in the background, and people say, "Oh, well, they have control over lives." Yeah, but I'm not interested in the lives of the people that control me. Supposedly, I'm interested in people like me. So therefore,
or people that constitute the majority of the population.
So therefore, all that doesn't exist anymore as reality.
Yeah.
We've gone beyond that. I'm not interested in those people anymore. I'm interested in us, everybody else. So
that's what I'm saying. The realities of both of those finales just seem so beautifully obsolete compared to the way most shows, what the stakes of them are. Again, even shows we like Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire, even Better Call Saul. Will he get caught? And that was a great show.
That was a little bit different because it was like about other things at a point, but
again, like the final scene, but spoiler
Twin
alert,
Peaks obviously doesn't go into any of this.
That doesn't even qualify for this conversation.
Because it's really great.
No, I'm not trying to say it ain't.
No, I know, but I'm saying, we won't even.
That's a whole other thing. Right. But
The Deuce was a little bit different. That was another one that was kind of those things, but also about the history of a city.
Yeah.
And so, at a certain point, even.
I'll say The Wire, mostly because it was kind of sort of canceled, is not like these other shows either, but that's different.
Magic City? No, just kidding. We're not going to talk about that.
But, anyways. Now, all of that leads me to my second point, which actually, it dovetails nicely into that. And I'm going to preach the gospel of Lodge 49 for as long as my breath allows me to, okay? This show came out right around the same time Succession did. They literally are like polar opposites of shows, okay? One is about the rich, ultra-powerful elite. Who will win? One's about a guy who frequents between this and that, like temp service, okay? About what's my job going to be today? What's my job going to be next week? Where am I going to live? And then, let me go and join this, like, basically Masonic Lodge to find some sense of purpose in a life where I do not have any purpose, right? Well, maybe there is something there. Turns out not really. But that is such a beautiful show that's funny, but also very serious in what it's about, that represents to me what America is in the 2010s and 2020s. And again, it came out right around the same time, and that only lasted for like 2 seasons. I think it was not even getting like 1 million people an episode towards the end. I mean, it was pretty bad ratings-wise. What a great show. Seek out Lodge 49 if you're sick of the Successions of the world basically dominating all the conversation. And the show did have fans out there, but very, very small amount.
Let me say that there are a lot of shows like that now that attempt to be what you're saying, So don't.
That just reminds me of another thing we need to talk about.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Which actually would fit in, I think, to an antidote to some of these problems too.
But so there's a lot of these shows though, like on HBO, for example, like those shows, and all of these sound good from what I've heard. I don't know, but like Girls, Insecure. There's a lot of Showtime shows about things like this too.
Mm-hmm.
Euphoria, where they claim to be about real people, but they're like New York and LA people who are like, I'm trying to make rent. And it's like, well, your parents are like millionaires or something. You know, it's something like, oh, we go to this school or we do this. Or, you know. Or that's not really true. You know, whereas something like Lodge 49, I assume,
that's in
like
Long Beach, California,
actually about, and whatever, you know, but is actually about people.
Let me just read you real quick what the plot for Lodge 49 says on the Wikipedia page. AMC describes the series as a modern fable set in Long Beach, California, about a disarmingly optimistic local ex-surfer, Dud, played by Wyatt Russell, who's drifting after the death of his father and collapse of the family business. In the final season, Dud joins a fraternal order known as the Order of the Lynx, hoping the Lodge can put him, quote, on the path to recover the idealistic life he's lost. And his sister's a big character in the show. And then this older black man who kind of becomes his friend. What's his name? Ernie, I think. Ernie Fontaine, plumbing salesman, member of the Lodge. I think so, yeah. But and there's a lot of relationship stuff that happens with him and another member of the Lodge, and that they used to have a thing. Anyways, only 2 seasons and 20 episodes, so all I'm saying is try to check it out. I just really, those shows will forever be like lodged, no pun intended, in my head together because they came out right around the same time, and one got all the fanfare and was the HBO show. AMC now exists in a very strange place in terms ever since the ending of Mad Men and Breaking Bad.
Into the Badlands. Like what?
Of these shows that come and go and have not really had any. And again, this is an example of a really great one I thought that got made. And of course they're going to make so many.
Breaking Bad. Well, sorry, Better Call Saul was kind of the last one. And then now that Walking Dead's over, even that is. Yeah, it's confusing.
So check it out. Like I said, I forgot about this. We were meaning to talk about this. And I think this is a weird bridging of the gap, actually, of these two worlds of TV. Because I think this is one of the few shows
as much as I love it, I think it does fall into some problems we'll talk about in a bit with a lot of TV and movies in general that plague us now. But for the most part, does.
Well, I mean, specifically with class, that it does depict high class a little bit, but also those of a lower class. And that divide, I think, feeds what the show's ultimately about.
And they're both low class, ultimately.
Yeah, both
the lowest class, as a matter of fact.
Beef on Netflix, which has been getting really good reviews, I know, and we were like, oh yeah, we need to maybe check that out, just to give you a quick rundown of what it's about.
Who created it again? It was Lee Sung-jin.
Yeah, Lee Sung-jin.
So it's very much a South Korean kind of show in a lot of ways, even though it's in Los Angeles. But it's,
the two main cast members are Steven Yeun, who plays a character named Danny Cho, and then Ali Wong, stand-up comic, plays Amy Lau. They basically, the whole thing starts literally like on the first or second scene, a road rage incident between these two people, and how that spirals into the feud of the century, basically, and how these two people who come from, again, Danny, Steven Yeun's character, is this very, as it describes here on Wikipedia, down on his luck contractor, and then Ali Wong's Amy Lau, small business owner. She kind of has this artistic sensibility, but then
she's getting like bought out by a bigger company.
Company. She has a husband and a daughter.
And he was like, his parents had owned this hotel, and there was this whole long story about like something crazy that happened there involving his cousin, who's like this big criminal idiot guy. And how that all, and he's trying to make enough money to get them to come back and open a new hotel in America because they went back to Korea.
Now, we don't regularly watch a lot of shows that drop on Netflix just because there are so many that come and go, and not a lot that look like they'd be of interest to us.
This is made by A24 too, so
yeah, so there was that about it. I love this show. This is one of probably my favorite new shows I've seen in so many years. How it's both very funny, but also about some very big, serious things about today.
It's probably one of the better Netflix shows I've seen since probably Maniac. That I can think of. But
and how both depict anger and how, not only people of different classes are manifest their anger, but also just these two specific idiosyncratic characters, how they each do it. And also the show's in a big fundamental way about Asian Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Yoon, he's of Korean heritage. Ali Wong is, I believe, of Vietnamese heritage, I believe. Her husband was Japanese, I think, right? So the show's kind of, that's not like always the main thing about the show, but that's something that gets brought up. She's of Vietnamese heritage and also Chinese. So I just really love this show. It was kind of a breath of fresh air to me. Stephen Yoon is subtly one of our best actors in terms of the choices he's been making over the last so many years. We're big fans of the movie Burning, and we never did see Minari, but I heard that was really good, that he was in that. What about this show appealed to you in terms of what it means and represents as far as a new TV show?
Well, partly just the randomness of it. I think it was just very much like, wait, what? Like, it's just a road rage show. And it's like, okay. But I think it's just, first of all, it's literally one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Yeah. Like, it is just consistently
it really
funny.
Appeals to our sense of humor, too.
It's very random. Yeah. Like, and it's not as, like, it feels like every scene would be the funniest scene in anything, but it's every scene is that. Now, as the show goes on, it becomes a little bit more dramatic and it's a little less funny, and we'll talk about that in a little while about why I think that's kind of a problem at a certain point. But I think that it's just really funny but really dark in a lot of ways too. And I mean, it literally starts with, this isn't exactly a spoiler because you find it out very soon. It literally starts with the main character trying to buy grills so he can kill himself in his house. He's like gonna have them all and then basically asphyxiate himself. And that he's mad because then he can't turn them back in because they won't do it basically. Yeah. And the guy's like, "You've been in here a bunch of times over these grills. Like, I don't know how many more times we're going to allow you to return these." And he's kind of like, and just the fact that he, like, his way to deal with stress is to go and eat, like, a bunch of Burger King. And he, like, goes to specific Burger King and then drives out to this, like, area.
Plus, there's wanting to buy a lot of land.
Right, which is eventually where he does. And he goes there and he eats it all and he calls people on the phone angry about stuff. And it's interesting to see, like I said, him deal with that and then her dealing with it in a totally different way. Mm-hmm. And both of their manipulations of their own situation, how he becomes involved with this church group that's this Korean Christian church, and then her just in the midst of that merger and all these things. And
long story short, she gets involved with his brother that has like an affair with him. Yeah.
And they go to Vegas for a while.
Yeah, there's you gotta love anything that has a Vegas interlude.
Right, and all the X-Men related stuff in there. That's probably one of the funniest jokes I've ever seen. Anything is like all these words that are real, like first class new. Hey, this is the new X-Men. Like, and that guy any scene that guy was in was hilarious. That what's that actor's name?
I heard there was
cousin.
I heard there was some Me Too stuff that might have happened with him.
Oh, that's a shame because he was really funny.
David Chloe.
Yeah.
As Isaac Cho was his character's name.
Okay.
I don't know all the details.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't even heard that.
Yeah.
Let me just say this: based on the performance, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But if that's true. But no, I just really, really liked it a lot. I also liked the last episode, which was kind of almost an epilogue in a way to everything that had happened. But that was one thing that we kind of criticized about the show. First of all, is that it feels very A24-esque about what it is.
Yeah.
And while being about class in a lot of ways, is about the upper class a lot too. And so that's kind of, what does it say?
Rape comments
on his podcast. Okay.
Apparently, he said he engaged in rapey behavior. He then said, "Oh, it was entirely a work of fiction." He said,
"So it was just a joke that he shouldn't have made, or maybe not."
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll look about this later. At the end, like you said this, I remember you were like, "Yeah, kind of getting tired of things that feel like it have to build up to something." Like it's
got to build up to a shootout,
right,
or this big and physical cathartic, divide between characters,
right? Which is whatever. I mean,
yeah,
but yeah, that's something I kind of agreed about. I was like,
but the epilogue, I think, it kind of ends on a semi-shocking note, but was a chance for these two characters to have to be around each other and kind of not exactly totally reconcile with each other, but to have a sort of a reconciliation that happens.
Also, also awesome soundtrack. We talked about that multiple times, about
all of them
genuinely good songs, and also just like this fits this moment of how stupid this is. I mean, to end the whole show with Smashing Pumpkins as mayonnaise is just so random. But also that Bjork song that was at the end of the penultimate. Yeah, it's like very. And they're like gigging each other, driving and mad, and just hilarious.
Great show,
but very good show.
So that's on Netflix. I think there are going to be more seasons of it. I think.
I do wonder if that's going to be, like you said, almost like an anthology thing where it's different beefs, or if it's the same thing. I don't know. I'd be interested to see different. Just because I'm like, I don't know what you.
Yeah, I mean, I totally love this, and I think it could easily kind of stand as its own.
Because the risk that they're going to run is to have the cousin break out of prison, and that be a whole.
Considering whatever controversies he's got going on, they could even write him out of it.
Yeah,
fairly
I don't
easily.
know, because that would be the easiest thing to do. Is just like, oh, he's back, like, and just. He's back in this fish out of water comedy, or some crap.
I think this could really work as its own standalone thing. And now, if they make more of it, then if it's good, then sure. But this just feels like its own special little thing that I'd be content if that was it. But so that's Beef. Check it out on Netflix. Now, speaking of beefs, Jeff Bridges got a beef with God. We'll see if he can get to the bottom of it.
You think you can kill me, but you can't. I mean,
Here's the trailer for Fearless.
You okay? Were you in the crash?
No. There was no earthly reason why Max Klein survived the crash of Flight 202.
You're alive. Why didn't you call me?
I thought I was dead. But it left him with a heightened sense of reality.
I think he thinks he's invulnerable. I've seen it with the Vietnam vets.
You want to kill me, but you can't! And an extraordinary sense of life.
He and your wife are the only survivors I can't reach. She won't talk, and he won't admit the crash was bad.
He says it was good?
Says it was the best thing that ever happened to him.
I can't explain it, but you're safe with me.
So what are you telling me? There's no God, but there's you?
Is he falling in love with her?
It's not love. He wants to save her.
He's my best friend. It's like he sent me my own angel.
He's not an angel. He's a man.
I walked away from that crash with my life. That's what survived. The taste and touch and beauty of life. I won't give that up.
Let me be part of it.
Jeff Bridges, Isabella Rossellini, Rosie Perez, John Turturro, in a film directed by Peter Weir. Fearless.
That trailer, as Levi had said, is one that we've watched a lot, and just separately. And anytime you have, where Streets Have No Name from U2, I mean, that's such an amazing song, why not play it?
Yeah.
So,
I want to say quickly, I made a joke before that of, this is a very unfunny movie. Not even in like a ultra serious way, exactly. Like, I mean, it has moments of comedy, but this is a profoundly spiritual and serious. What it's literally about, that image is profoundly serious.
To describe what the pitch of this movie is very simple, and IMDb decides to get the noun, verb, adjective in there as quickly as possible. A man's personality is dramatically changed after surviving a major airline crash. I think one of the things I really love about this movie, among many, is the simplicity of the idea, but the density in its realization. You know, just to go through some of the facts about this again. Fearless is a 1993 American drama film directed by Peter Weir, and starring Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges.
Does it say Jeffrey Bridges?
No, his name is Jeffrey Leon Bridges, though. Just a FYI.
Leon Bridges.
Isabella Rossellini, Rosie Perez, and John Turturro. You know, immediately, a lot of those names I would not immediately slam together in my head.
Tom Hulse.
Yeah. But I'm like, I'm in, sure.
Yeah, right.
Specifically, Jeff Bridges and Isabel Rossellini is a married couple. That's not a
it's
pairing
like,
I would immediately...
And that the son doesn't have Rossellini's accent whatsoever is interesting, because it's like you think he'd have somewhere in between just by nature of being...
Now, Rosie Perez and John Turturro were both in Spike Lee's movie...
Do the Right Thing.
Do the Right Thing, of course.
That movie, you remember that?
It was a great movie.
Yeah.
It was written by Raphael Iglesias. I'm not sure how you say that name. Iglesias, maybe. Adapted from his novel of the same name. And I mean this is a compliment to the movie, because I've talked about how I love movies that have novelistic tones.
Oh, like Iglesias. Like Julio Iglesias.
Yeah, okay. I really love this movie. It feels like a novel. Like I can imagine this.
It was.
Aspects
he wrote
of it.
this as a novel. And
so he wrote it himself as a book first. And there's a lot of aspects of it that feel very DeLillo-ian, but it's also very different in other ways. Rosie Perez was nominated for Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role as Carla Rodrigo. Jeff Bridges' role as Max Klein is widely regarded as one of the best performances of his career. Let's talk about Peter Weir for a moment before we get into the cast for this. Again, he's a Australian director.
Yeah.
He's made a lot of pretty popular movies over the years.
Especially
grand total.
in America.
Yeah. As you said earlier, Picnic at Hanging Rock, Gallipoli, Witness, which I always laugh anytime I see. That's the Harrison Ford Amish movie.
Yeah.
Dead Poet Society, that is a very widely seen popular movie, and I think pretty good. This, of course. Truman Show is definitely one of his most popular. That was kind of at the height of Jim Carrey's career when that movie was made. And it also has some spiritual overtones to it as well.
I mean, I agree in theory, but
Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, which we've yet to see, and I've seen bits of, and that has become this kind of big rallying cry movie on film Twitter that a lot of people really love. And The Way Back.
Also made that movie The Last Wave in Australia too, which I always wanted to see but haven't.
What about the cinema of Peter Weir is most present in your mind when you think about what his quote movies mean?
Well, it's interesting because there's different types of them. I put them in three camps of the three different movies of his I've seen, which are Picnic at Hanging Rock, Fearless, and The Truman Show. To me, I see Picnic at Hanging Rock, I think a lot of that type of movie at that time period, kind of taking the how you put it, like the paperback historical novel, literary novel of the 60s and 70s, and adapting that about it's kind of like The Thornbirds is a similar thing, which is also about Australia. But that's all this very like mysterious and weird. To say that was a big inspiration for aspects of the second season of The Leftovers.
Third season.
No, the second.
Because
those girls aren't go missing.
Yeah, never. Oh, right. Yeah.
And
I was thinking about Australia.
Never mind. Right. Yeah. But that this very kind of understated and lightly horrifying movie in a lot of ways, and very sobering, and kind of New Hollywood-esque, even though made in Australia. Then you have a movie like this, which is more popular, but incredibly, almost unbelievably, I don't want to use the word understated again, but very particular and direct, yet not obvious. It's very wise and specific about the way that it tells its story. Then you get a movie like The Truman Show, which is very obvious and not at all opaque, and at times maddeningly simple.
But it has a certain reputation for average moviegoers as being very deep. Movie.
This is what being deep is.
Yeah.
So that's all to say that there are different phases to Peter Weir's career, and I'm interested in all of them. But this, I feel like, meets the intersection of him at his greatest. It's a very popular movie, but is very...
Well, meaning its aesthetics?
Yes, popular, meaning that it was a big movie that came out in the multiplayer.
It was a studio movie.
It was a studio movie.
Yeah.
I don't mean popular as in it was like...
Yeah, let's just, real quick, the budget was $20 million. It made $7 million. So
yeah.
Didn't make... Warner Brothers Studios somehow recovered, though.
Yeah.
Over the years.
But that... I'll give you an example about what I mean about this movie specifically, is that you have it open, and it's like after the plane crash has happened and it's in the cornfield and it's just people walking around. And you're like, well, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. It doesn't start with the plane crash. And throughout the movie, it shows parts of the plane crash itself.
And in essence, it almost goes in reverse to an extent as far as the narrative. Yeah. Not in a way like Memento.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah. Or Irreversible or something. But and even just the whole beginning 20 minutes, I think, is just literally one of the most perfect openings to any movie in a lot of ways. Of it's just him leaving the crash, renting a car, going to a hotel, like not talking to anybody.
It's not wordy at all about what's going on. It's just like him moving, and we don't really get inside of his head in a meaningful way.
Right, for a long time.
And it kind of gradually, we get a better idea about...
And really, we don't get an idea who he is until the ending of the movie. I mean, he's almost like a ghost throughout the whole thing. And so, just to describe quickly what the movie's about, which we already said, it's about a guy who's involved in a plane crash. It's like a regular charter, plane. Well, not charter plane, like a commercial
airliner,
that crashes outside of Bakersfield. I think it was going from like San Francisco to Houston, because most of the movie's in San Francisco,
where he lives.
Yeah, and he lives like a lot of other people will also survive.
Yeah,
but he almost enters in the midst of the plane crash this like almost omniscience, or this like almost zen calm, and becomes this kind of heroic figure for saving some people by just his more calm demeanor and thinking about getting them out of the crash. And the kind of cost of that is him thinking he literally by the name is an immortal almost.
Yeah.
Thankfully they don't overplay that in the movie as much as it is in the trailer, where it's like, oh, he thinks he can never die or whatever. It's not exactly that he doesn't think he can die, because he saw all those people die. But it's also that he just doesn't care whether he lives or dies.
And I think one of the central questions, the central question of the movie, I think, is what he's grappling with, and what we as an audience grapple with when we watch Jeff Bridges in this role, is the zen quality it seems as though he has at first. But then the kind of moral panic that sets in after a certain point, when he realizes, well, what's it all about? What's it all for if I don't, he's somebody who didn't really have a strong spiritual identity before that. And, in contrast to Rosie Perez's character, who lost her son, who she was on the plane as well, and she feels obviously very guilt-ridden about that, and she's very Catholic, and she's kind of, and I say this as a religious person, so I'm not meaning this in a bad way. She's really clinging to religion to give her this answer about why my son died, what could I have done. And at first, it almost seems like he's helping her through saying, well, he's kind of basically an atheist. I don't really believe in God. My father died, and that's when I was a kid, and that's when I knew that God didn't really exist. He just died. And it seems as though almost that he's trying to help her out, but I think more than anything, he's trying to get to someone who went through the same emotional and spiritual experience he did and get him to feel just as empty as hollow as he feels inside. Right. I think that's kind of what the character is trying to do. Mm-hmm. And his basically inability to do that to her because she's someone who's much more full of life than he is, that really sends him into the panic in the last act of the movie for him and his inability to bring somebody down to where he is. And that's where he really goes to the point where he doesn't really care if he lives or dies anymore. Right. One of the big kind of emotionally cathartic scenes in the movie, it's kind of arguably at the end of the second act, I guess, if you wanted to like divide it up, is when she's kind of basically having a panic attack over the fact that she's still thinking about that
she had actually let go of him when they were kind of landing.
And so his excuse or his form of catharsis is, well, let's drive as fast as we can in this car at this brick wall, and I want you to hold on. And there's a lot of symbolism wrapped up in this. Hold on to the box of tools that I'm getting from my dead father who died all these years ago. And that at that point in the movie, they're like, oh, let's go buy like Christmas gifts. It's around Christmas time. It's Fearless a Christmas movie to these dead people in their lives. It's not, by the way. That he's just driving as fast as he can, and he slams into the wall and hits it. And he nearly dies, like anyone would in that instance. And she realizes that she let go of that, and even though he was telling her, hold on to it like it's your baby. He in his own way, through acting like nothing matters, is his attempt to wrestle control around a situation he knows he has no control over. Mm-hmm. And his trying to rationalize how or why this happened. And again, I'm saying this as a Christian, and it's undeniably that my own Christian lens and way that which I view my own life and the lives of others. So, of course, there's that. But I think, again, as a Christian watching this movie, I'm seeing this as a man who is trying to mask and charade himself in it doesn't matter to hide the aspect that it does matter. I just don't know what to do about it. And I think I've been beating around the bush. I love this movie. I think this movie's a masterpiece, a subtle masterpiece. And from the very beginning, to get to your point where you're saying this is a very serious movie, when you see that Warner Brothers logo and the score immediately is like, are you ready for this? Like grabbing you by the shirt collar, saying this is no fun and games.
Because it
like
starts
what this
with
is
like
about.
The title card is like the words "fearless" over black, and then in the background is like the smoke and the like cornfield. And it's already just like, what is this? Like, just from beginning to end, pretty much. So, yeah.
And meanwhile, over the course of the whole narrative, as he's, he seems like he has such little interest in his wife and his son, and almost resents them in any way, like, cramping his style, almost is what it feels like, the vibe he's giving off, is... I think a terrific explanation and exploration of grief, of what post-traumatic stress disorder looks like, because we haven't used that term yet, but that's exactly what he's going through.
Well, that's what they call it in the movie of John Turturro and Tom Hulce's characters kind of trying to, well, first of all, one of them's trying to just literally connect to the person. The other one is trying to see how much money they can make for the settlement. So that's a whole part of the movie, too. But that is what it is the whole time, very clearly. But but it goes beyond that, though. I think too. I think it's beyond post-traumatic stress of also just these big questions he already had lodged inside himself.
Mm-hmm. But what do you think about what this movie's saying in a spiritual or philosophical way about what an experience would do to such a person?
I love this whole movie, but I don't want to jump too far ahead by talking about the ending. Cause
we can get to that in a little bit later.
One of my favorite endings in any movie I've thought about since I saw it, but especially since I just rewatched it. I've just been thinking about it. There are a few endings that can just make me sit in silence for a while and think about, and that's one that does that, I think. but that I don't totally know what this movie's saying spiritually, because I think it's kind of in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I would just verge on saying it doesn't matter. It is an intensely spiritual movie. It doesn't matter whether you are spiritual or not.
Yeah.
And
it's not exactly, you have to believe this religion or whatever. It's talking about it in this more...
But it is very Catholic in certain ways about questioning, because I think that is a big part of Catholicism that is not, as someone of the Baptist faith...
Or Protestants in general.
Yeah, that I very much admire about Catholicism is that question of doubt and why are these things happening to me? And maybe if and this isn't a belief I have necessarily, but that idea, maybe if I pray hard enough, or maybe if I do this, or does that do anything? Yeah. I think those are all Catholic questions that I'm very fascinated by and agree with, that I think that Protestants don't, and have a connection to, of that. The normalcy of doubt or momentary losses or lapses in faith, I think, are important, and for some reason Protestants are afraid to discuss those things.
Yeah, I mean, we've been groomed and raised in the Southern Baptist worldview, and those are things that are very much seen as taboo. Basically,
you don't talk about loss in faith or lapse in faith ever. And that's, I think is a problem.
Yeah, but, I agree.
Anyway, that because we talk about in our church the whole idea of these hard times and things, but that's always this unspoken aspect over here about the loss of faith, or do I believe in God, and questions like that, and these doubt, and that's something that's just never brought me, because it's like,
or why me? Either why me in the sense of why am I spared of this, or why did I befall this tragedy?
Yeah.
Either way,
and people are,
and
really
that's what
not
this movie's fundamentally about.
Discussing that, which I am. So yeah, and then the movie kind of ends on this note of just thankfulness.
Gratitude.
And gratitude of that I was in this situation, because first of all he saved these people, and also he lived, because that's,
and I think also he realizes that his wife is this thing that he's been pushing away, that he finally kind of embraces her literally and figuratively in the final moments.
I really like this the first time, but it is, and I give it 4.5 only because there's certain little minor things, but now that we're talking about it, I don't know, maybe it is that up to a 5-star bump, I don't know. But the first time I saw it, I was so kind of, I think this is natural, just put off by the directness of it. I was like, even though I love things like this, I was just very like, I don't really know what to do with this, like, kind of. But that, just I've chewed on it ever since I saw it, because it's one of those movies. I feel like anybody that would see this, no matter, even just regular viewers, would see this and be like, and then they would think, that's one I'm gonna have to think about. Like, we kind of joke about that sometimes, but that does happen. I mean, that happens to everybody. That does happen to us as much as we watch movies still. That there are those, even a movie as simple as this, is like, oh, you're gonna think about this for a while, and I have. But I have, especially since watching it too, just constantly thinking about what it means, and there's all these other kind of, like I said, rabbit holes you can go down with the movie about, like, John Turturro's character of, he has PTSD and I'm trying to help him out, and then Tom Hulce's character like, I'm trying to get this settlement for his friend.
What's he keep saying? What's his recurring phrase?
I know, I'm terrible.
I know, I'm terrible. But he's perfect for this role, by the way, too, because he plays an absolute great scumbag that you want to get rid of at any given moment.
But also is trying to help, but it's this weird. He's a lawyers.
Well, that gets to even what Jeff Bridges is doing with Rosie Perez. Right. He's trying to help her, but for his own selfish reasons.
They're both
so he can get some clarity about who he is.
Quantify grief in either money or like emotional currency. It's weird, but and then also one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's one of the more obvious scenes, but I really love is where they have that big meeting of all the survivors. And there's all these different people reacting in different ways. Like I think one of the more interesting characters is that guy who just like stands up and kind of interrupts, and he's like, I have to get back to work if this is what this is going to be.
He's got like a suit on. He's very
just like, and then it's interesting because you see some of those characters, and then at the end of the movie, when it kind of flashes back again to the actual event, you see them on the plane, and kind of, I don't remember how he's shown, but I feel like I remember him of being a lot more like, scared and reacting the way a normal person would.
And then there's even also in that scene the absurdity of the poor mother who wants to know about her son who died.
Yeah,
but wants
she hadn't talked to him for like 6 months. I mean, they had a good relationship.
Yeah, but she shows up and wants some kind of clarity to something that I think in a logical way makes no sense, because it's like, well, he died. What more do you need? But it gets to this emotional. I didn't get to see my son this final time. Does anybody remember what he looked like, right? And the sadness of that, and Rosie Perez, as she's getting frustrated, she's sitting there because she's thinking about the loss of her child.
Well, then the woman is there, the flight attendant that had told her just to hold him because the seatbelt wasn't working, and that there's that whole question of it's your fault because you told me to do that.
But of course, the woman was trying to look out for the baby.
But then she reacts very realistically, and something you wouldn't see in most other movies, which is that in a lot of movies it would be like, you're right, I am at fault. She then is like, no, this wasn't what this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to connect, and I'm sorry, but no, it wasn't my fault. I was just trying to, I feel like that's a way more realistic human reaction to that, of wanting to push the blame away rather than accept it. But another interesting detail that happens in another scene that's similar to, like you said, about that woman trying to get clarity from that, is that them trying to put this monetary dollar on how much pain did the man go through, his friend. And he's asked at one point, he's like, how did he die? He's like, he was decapitated. He's almost like, what do you want? What more do you want from that? Because they're wanting to say, how quickly did he die, so that they can then put some dollar amount on the suffering.
He went through pain and suffering so they can get more money.
And it's like, I mean, I guess everybody did, however much money.
And then eventually he gets so frustrated, he's all right, I'll say whatever you want. And,
And but that whole idea of you wanting to know what happened, but then when you're confronted with the reality of the horror of the situation, you kind of retract and say, oh, I didn't want to know that. And it's like, well, that's what happened. He was decapitated. And so I think that's all of those elements are things you would not find in most movies, like
especially not commercially released,
something
big,
like
major release,
Incredibly Loud and Dangerously Close, or whatever that movie.
Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close.
Whatever.
I
don't know.
I heard the book for that was good.
But movies like that are very obvious things about grief, which I haven't even seen that movie, but I heard the movie was awful. So, but you just don't really see things like that about, which there are a lot of movies that are about grief in quotation marks, but I feel like this is one of the most effective versions of that.
Yeah.
And speaking to that point, I guess, did you want to say anything else, or you want to talk about the ending, or?
I just want to say in general, the whole vibe of this movie and the whole feeling, I think, there are a lot of other serious dramas of the 90s, so I'm not saying this is the only one. Mm-hmm. But the 90s in general, over time, have acquired this sort of ironic, detached, vibe or feeling from all the pop culture that generated from it. What I think really stands out of this movie as far as its larger legacy and why it should be more widely seen and talked about is that it is like very serious, very direct. Like, this is about a very serious thing that, we need to think about, and you need to think about how you would react to such a thing. And of course, it comes out 8 years before the September 11th attacks. And so I think there's a remoteness that this movie probably had to have in 1993 that was not as confrontational as it would be if it had been released 10 years later. But, it's a very different movie, but it also has similarities to something like, say, United 93, which is, of course, directly about the September 11th attacks and takes place on a plane, and kind of very gripping, grueling experience.
It's about another version of heroism, which is self-sacrifice, quite literally. So, whereas this isn't exactly that.
This is obviously that. I think that's going for a docu-realism.
Yeah.
This is going for a much more spiritual, philosophical bent,
I wouldn't even say magical realism at all, but more about poetry of sorts.
Like a poetic realism, maybe.
Yeah.
Get to the ending, though, because we can talk about that. Well, even before that, this might actually get us there to that. Ask the question, to what extent does Jeff Bridges' character have a death wish in this movie? Because there's, where he's early in the movie to test whether or not he's immortal or whatever. He goes and sees an old friend of his that he implies he had some sort of relationship with years ago. And that's what I love. We don't get some big belabored explanation. It's something the characters both know, and we only see a distance a version of. But he eats like strawberries because he's allergic to strawberries on pancakes, and he's kind of mad that the pancakes are not exactly what he thought. That's kind of a funny little.
Just bring me the strawberries.
And so he's almost like tempting fate with that because you're like, well, if this might have just been God saw that you were not killed, or maybe just coincident, whatever you want to believe, but he was not killed. You're really tempting fate by even doing that. That's a very low grade version of it, but I feel like over the course of the movie, it becomes more and more pronounced in terms of whether or not he does have a death wish. We're getting to the point where he's standing on a skyscraper, like almost dancing, almost like, well, if I fall, so what, And then when he drives at a wall where he could easily have been killed by that, which all leads us to the ending where he is eating strawberries yet again. That's instant X. It almost is bookends for the movie. And
has an
allergic reaction that very nearly kills him, to the point where whether he's seeing a vision or a flashback or a look to the next life where he has a choice to make. Do you want to live or do you want to die?
Because he's reliving because
we finally at the very end of the movie see the whole entirety of the plane crash.
Which is the scene you heard last week.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, I think that it's, and he kind of sees all that, and then there's this really interesting, it's weird, it's like the survivors all standing or sitting in the
fuselage, basically.
The fuselage, but it's empty.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's weird, because it doesn't look like heaven exactly, but it's like this,
it is very clearly, I think, it's using that imagery to say, well, right now, you're either going to the beyond, whatever that is, heaven, hell, whatever, or you can go back. And that's the choice.
And so up until that point in the movie, at this point, I think he is questioning the whole time, why am I alive? After all the things that happened to all these people, and I saved these people due to some weird...
And that happens a lot where people who act in very heroic ways in natural disasters or in situations feel they don't want the hero treatment. And they genuinely think that it's...
And in a lot of ways don't want to even be alive at a point. And so that's kind of what the whole movie's about, I think, is us recognizing that. And him kind of... almost playing into that heroism, though, of being this kind of opaque, like
Zen martyr,
unapproachable figure of like, I'm very wise and I just don't care, and like, and so by the end, when there is that moment of his wife is calling to him, and he's realizing, oh, what my life even is, and why I even ever wanted to be alive, and that he finally wakes back up and is hyperventilating, and then hugs her and says, I'm alive, and the movie immediately ends.
Yeah.
Is just one of the most profound and emotionally affecting endings I've ever seen, because also, I think we sometimes, I don't want this to happen all the time, but we sometimes have strayed away in movies from climaxes being literally right up to the final moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would even argue that the climax of the movie is him saying those words and the movie's over.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately him finally realizing that he is alive and that he did survive. Because the whole movie, he never really cries about the whole thing. He never has this big emotional response.
So there's a lot of, early on, he's almost walking around like a ghost.
Right, and so you could say the whole time he's in shock or whatever, but it's like a prolonged shock. But that's finally when he realizes that he is alive, and so I think that is such a profound ending that I've thought about ever since I saw it, but especially seeing it.
Well, as you said, not many movies have you to that very last moment, up to that point.
Yeah.
Something that's very different that immediately comes to mind is something like North by Northwest, in terms of that's a very adventure-oriented plot that literally is not even exactly totally resolving itself in the final moment, even though it implies what does happen, but it's a very curious ending. But yeah, I think I agree that not a lot of movies have the courage to put you in that place, and not just that place, but over the course of the whole movie, how uncomfortable the narrative in many ways is about asking these questions.
That is a reaction that should have happened within the first 2 minutes of the movie. Mm-hmm. But it takes that long, and you go on this whole journey over this, and then you're like, oh, yeah, finally, you know. But you don't really feel that way about it so much as thankfulness that he finally reached that point.
Yeah.
Because that I think is also a kind of statement to say, no, you need to have these reactions and these feelings towards events like this, or you're not, or it proves you're alive, like, you know. And it's an uncomfortableness.
I think there's obviously something about masculinity that's more hesitant to come to that point to realize that than femininity is.
But no, I mean, I feel like the way we've talked about it has barely even scratched the surface for what that whole ending even means. That is very... The whole movie's great, but especially... You know what they say? You know what Billy Wilder once said? You have a great opening, a great ending, and no bad scenes. Then you've got a movie.
I want to talk a little bit about Jeff Bridges in relation to this movie too. I think a lot of Jeff Bridges. I said this at the end of the last podcast. I think he's weirdly among our more underrated actors. He's very similar to Jeff Daniels in the way that I think he can do comedy and drama both very, very well. When you think of Jeff Bridges in the 90s, of course, Big Lebowski is going to be the first thing that pops up. And that movie has a certain reputation for being this spiritual movie. I think the Coen brothers would probably even laugh at that themselves if somebody said that to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That anybody would get much spiritual truth from that. Even though it does play into Jeff. I mean, Jeff Bridges has been a version of the dude in other movies before, so it's very clearly playing on him. But he's a like a sports car of an actor. He can do about anything really you want him to do. And I think there's been a string of movies over the last, say, 10-ish years where he's more settled into not, and this happens to not just him, a lot of actors, where they're not taking as many risks as perhaps they once were.
Yeah, like the last movie I can think of that was like a big Jeff Bridges performance was like Crazy Heart, and that's been like a long
Hell or High Water would have been after that.
Yeah, but that's a very old man role, like
yeah.
Oh, you mean no? I mean like, just like an actual Jeff Bridges, like in the way that you're talking about.
Yeah, he won he won an Academy Award for
Biodigital Jazz, man. I mean, but no, that's what I mean. I haven't even seen that movie, so I don't know. But I assume that's probably one of the last big, like you said, versatile Jeff Bridges performances. Whereas now he's just like in movies.
He's also even his early roles. With Enemy of the Pod, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. We have a couple of those.
Yeah, Jonathan Depp first and foremost.
Hitler #1.
Well,
yeah. I'm just saying, just want to be clear. But anyway.
But early Jeff Bridges too. I mean, like The Iceman Cometh. John Frankenheimer's adaptation of that.
His work with Cimino,
Eugene O'Neill play. Yeah, him in that too. And what I love about him in specifically Heaven's Gate, how likable he is, because everybody else in that movie has something you're sad. Even Chris Christopherson has like this life he comes from and what he's doing now. There's like context. He's just this immediately walks into the movie, even though he's running like a cockfighter. You know what I mean? This animal fight. A very nice, likable guy in the realm of that. But just
because in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, it's different because he's a very cocky young guy.
That's he's good in that.
Oh yeah, I think he's
Clint Eastwood.
One of his greatest performances, honestly. But
when you said Cimino movies, I wasn't even thinking of that immediately.
Last Picture Show he's in too. I forgot.
Yeah, he's really great in that too. So he was really great. And the thing about the '70s were there were so many other big stars and actors that people talk about.
Bad Company by the Robert Benton and that made was like a Western, Civil War Western, but I've never seen.
But he is a really amazing actor, and I think this really is the best performance I've seen him give because he's got that. He smiles in the movie, but other than when it happens on the plane, because that's a whole other character almost.
Yeah.
Like after that his smile is almost one of smugness, and one of I'm going to put a brave face on this truth that I don't totally know and understand. The final moments of him are another an evolution is taking place of his character in that final moments of rebirth and kind of a rejuvenation of himself. And the calmness he has on the plane is when you see those scenes is why he left such an impact and an impression on those other people, because you look at everybody else naturally, I can only imagine what I'd be thinking, is freaking out, is, oh my God, I'm going to die, like, or at the kind of the end of the ropes. And this sense of calmness and serenity he has, that he almost spends the rest of the movie trying to figure out, how do I get that back? Because I don't feel that at all now after it's all over. Amazing performance. And somebody that you don't normally think of amazing performances with, which is unfortunate because she's really great, and a lot when movies that really decide to spotlight and highlight her is Rosie Perez in this, I think is also great. I'm actually shocked in a good way that she was even nominated for an Academy Award. I'm surprised this movie even got enough play to even be. I'm just looking here, by the way, too. It was an October release in '93. Shocked in a good way that she was nominated for this. She's also really great. What quality do you think she brings to the narrative in general as far as her performance, that of Rosie Perez?
Like I said, I think she's great in everything I've seen her in.
I most immediately think of her with Do the Right Thing in terms of movies where she's more spotlighted and highlighted.
Yeah, that and The Counselor. I'm kidding. Of course, that movie's awful.
Yeah. Oh, it's actually a masterpiece. As people like to say a lot,
I'm aware that people say that.
Do not agree,
That's not a reality in which I inhabit, I guess is the easiest thing I can say. Whose office you now inhabit. But no, I think she's really great in this, and like obviously plays the big, sad woman role, which, is often a...
It's almost a stereotype, but it's
stereotype for this type of movie.
That's a very hard role to play, though, in reality.
Yeah. And she plays one of the better ones I've ever seen, versions of that, I think. And so, and I think it is interesting that his sanity almost comes at the expense of her deliverance from that. And then he can finally do that himself.
I love, too, that the weird sort of romance.
Yeah, but also what's interesting too, is that she by the end says, "Yeah, but goodbye."
Yeah,
that's enough.
Well, I think she realizes that I have a lot of affection for you, but I cannot have you bring me to where you're at.
Right, and that kind of shocks him in a certain way, starting to come out of that as to say, "Oh wait, but I care about this person, and now they're not going to care about me almost," and so. Yeah, I think she's really great, and in a movie that's already really great, is a big part of it. Because Isabella Rossellini's character is really good, but she could get maybe a little more to do.
Another thing too, I was thinking about with Isabella Rossellini, who, if you're like us, one of the biggest things you're going to think of is Blue Velvet, or even her small role in, say, Wild at Heart, like David Lynch oriented things.
Or Saddest Music in the World, for example.
It's very strange for her to be the model of sanity and serenity, because that's not usually a role you see her play. And so I think that adds a weirdly...
You didn't necessarily see her mother play that either, exactly.
No, disquieting quality in a meta way to the narrative is that Isabel Rossellini is kind of our life jacket of sanity, and that's usually not a place where you're at with her in the movie. So I think she does a great job. But again, I think, I don't really think this movie has, quote, flaws exactly. But,
no, it's just more the screen time.
Yeah, that could be, she could have more to do or have more of a life other than being the mother and the wife.
There's like she does do all that. It shows what she does for a living and some of that stuff, sort of like a ballet instructor or whatever. But don't you love how gloriously opaque his job is?
Yeah, architect.
Yeah, it's like, what do y'all do?
Yeah,
I mean,
there's like a moment where I'm going to go up and work on. Oh, we can talk about this a little bit too.
Yeah,
where she goes.
That was almost like a all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy moment, because you almost expect him to be like, "How do you like it?" Like,
So he's been working on something.
Now
up
Jeff
there.
Bridges and Isabella Rossellini in The Shining. That would have been something. There's something.
Him as Jack Torrance. That would have been. That would have been interesting.
Imagine him just going insane. All the time.
His Here's Johnny would have been something.
At first he would have been like, "Oh, Like
that flipping thing. Yeah, just like I'm crazy. I can actually see this now. I'm thinking about it.
Interesting.
AI, Jeff Bridges as in The Shining. Like, but that is one of the more disturbing moments I think of the movie in a very quiet way, not in a very loud way.
No, and it doesn't like make it a horror moment or anything where he shows up and sees her.
Anything though that does show Bosch artwork in it is immediately, because I find a lot of his stuff to be
disgusting,
horrifying in a lot of ways, and even that, which is not that I don't remember the name of it, but it's like basically, that like this big black void, and then it's like going to heaven is basically what it's implying in the work. That he keeps like circling. She goes through all this work, and he's acting like he's been working on his architecture stuff. And then she goes up there and looks, and she's looking through it, and all this artwork of him scribbling this big black hole, which is literally what he's grappling with the whole movie in a literal and figurative way. And then that's inspired by the Bosch artwork of almost the opposite, where everything is in black, and then what the whole itself is one towards enlightenment or spirituality or heaven in a roundabout way. And so that's a weird, very clever as far as the difference between those two things. But any other final thoughts about Fearless?
No, I just think it's one of the most randomly, I wouldn't even say underrated, just underseen movies.
Under-discussed, definitely.
And I think it will eventually get there based on Peter Weir, the love of Peter Weir. But honestly, I think it's too deep of a movie for people to admit that they love. Just frankly, we're just getting into a more infantile and juvenile culture now, where it feels like the time of Fearless has kind of passed us by. I don't know, but we'll see.
We think a lot of the movie, and we highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. We've kind of literally spoiled the whole movie at this point. But as you said, like, to talk about it is not the same thing, and this is true of most great movies, as to watch it unfold before you. So check out Fearless. We watched, I think, a Warner Archive.
They put it out the last few years, which is good, which maybe made it go up slightly as far as people knowing about it. More than just a joke in Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Another thing, too, I think why we wanted to highlight this, in comparison to a movie we're getting ready to talk about that's really well known, is that, again, we've talked about some big 90s movies, some that are more obscure, trying to say, hey, look at this. This is something from the 90s that I think is a great representation of its time, but also has a timeless quality that makes it continue to be relevant to this day. So check out Fearless, amazing movie, and again, 30 years this year in October. It's 30th anniversary. Now, a movie that is much more widely known and is really great in its own way. Here is the trailer for Groundhog Day.
Groundhog time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
Weatherman Phil Connors is spending the day in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania.
Phil? Ned! Ned Ryerson. I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show.
Bing!
Bing!
But Phil's about to find out he's not just stuck in Puxatawney.
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
Chance of departure today, 100%.
He's stuck
Groundhog Day!
in Groundhog Day.
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
Phil?
Ned Ryerson?
Bing!
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again?
At first, he was a little anxious.
Phil? What?
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
I'd say the chance of departure is 80%.
But now,
we could do whatever we want.
he's discovering the possibilities.
Don't you worry about cholesterol?
Why?
And living life like there's no tomorrow.
Phil Connors!
Ned!
Because there isn't.
I am an immortal. I have been stabbed, shot, burned, frozen, electrocuted. I'm a god.
You're God.
I'm a god. I'm not the god. He's out of his gourd.
But to get what his heart wants most
What are you looking for, Phil? A date for the weekend?
means living this day over again till he gets it right.
Believe it or not, I studied 19th century French poetry.
What a waste of time.
I studied 19th century French poetry.
La fille qui j'aimerais.
You speak French.
Oui.
Bill Murray, Andy McDowell.
To the groundhog.
I always drink to world peace. Well, what should we drink to?
I like to say a prayer and drink to world peace.
Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
He might be okay.
Yes!
Life has a funny way of repeating itself.
What did you do today?
Oh, same old, same old.
I love how, and here we have Phil. The whole thing is,
it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over
again
and over. Like,
you get it
one more time and over.
Yeah.
Groundhog Day is a 1993 American fantasy comedy film directed by Harold Ramis for a screenplay by he and Danny Rubin. Let's see what else he did. This is the main thing.
Danny Rubin.
Yes. Hear No Evil. Ever heard of that? Came out same year.
Heard of it.
SFW. Yeah.
This is by far the biggest thing.
He wrote the musical version of it.
I didn't even know there was a musical.
But yeah.
Harold Ramis is obviously much more widely known.
Stars Bill Murray, Andy McDowell, Chris Elliott. Well, starring Chris Elliott. I don't know that that's exactly the way I would describe this movie, but anyway. It tells the story of Phil Connors, played by Murray, a cynical television weatherman covering the annual Groundhog Day event in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, who becomes trapped in a time loop, forcing him to relive February 2nd repeatedly. So, yeah, I mean...
This is another very, quote, simplistic premise.
Yeah. Literally the idea of, for this man, the most annoying, stupid thing that he could do, he has to do every day, the same day, basically for what is implied to be, and what Harold Ramis said he thought of as thousands of years. And it never says exactly how long. But, it's a very simple premise. This movie's been ripped off ad nauseum at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like, and there might have been versions of this before this. I don't really know, but this is by far the biggest I can think of before up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
But this has a little bit bigger of a cast, so maybe we'll go through it kind of.
Well, let's just talk about the box office and budget
sure.
of it first.
So,
I'm curious.
Wait a second. What? Let's say Anne Rice's book inspired this, supposedly. I'll have to look at that in a second.
I wonder if it's got a similar plot.
Maybe.
That way.
So it was made for $14.6 to $30 million. It made $105 million, so it
it's
made a
profitable.
lot of money. Hang on, I want to look into this for a second. So there's a book called The Vampire Lestat, and it was kind of a like a sort of counter narrative to Interview with the Vampire.
Okay.
And I guess it's kind of about similar things. I don't really know. I'll look more into this later. But yeah, the movie's very simple about he goes through the whole day of covering Groundhog Day for, I think it's the 5th time in a row or something. He's
also, he's named Phil.
Pittsburgh. Yeah.
You know, there's an element to
right.
that, too.
And it's basically about, he's got this new producer going with him, played by Andy McDowell. And he just clearly doesn't care about any of it.
And she's bubbly and energetic, and she's new at it, and he's like, this is old hat, this sucks. This is the last year I'm doing this. Like, you know.
So he's thinking about quitting the station, going somewhere else. Actually, I just looked here, this is random, mostly shot in Woodstock, Illinois, instead of Philadelphia. But
or in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Well, Western Pennsylvania.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Punxsutawney is what I meant to say, not Philadelphia, which is on the whole other
well,
side.
Phil, yeah, it's,
of the state. A lot of feels going on.
Yeah.
Up there.
They are the feel-good state, famously.
Not really. Matter of fact, a lot of people come down here for certain reasons,
plenty, actually.
other than the cold.
I want to just Google
and
feel good state and see what else state months came up. Anyways, I'm sorry. We keep going.
Hang on, I want to see this.
Feel state cannabis game.
What? Anyway, all right. So yeah, and like basically he wakes up and finds himself within the same day. The same situations keep happening to him.
All the people are literally going through their same routines. They're going through
the same bits of dialogue that were already in their subconscious to give, basically.
Right.
And there are different versions that happen from that, but it doesn't matter because it resets every day. He tries to kill himself eventually in multiple ways and lives, and it literally keeps resetting. I think the first thing he tries to do is break a pencil and put it by the clock, and then he wakes up and the pencil's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah. And basically the whole point of the story by the end is him falling in love with Annie McDowell's character,
who he's attracted to early on,
right.
Pretty much, at least in a purely physical way.
Right.
But, yeah.
But it gets to know her. But the kind of twist of the whole thing is that he starts every day at the beginning of their, what is in her mind, the beginning of their relation, or the beginning of their basic even acquaintanceship.
Yeah.
In any formal
But
sense.
he would naturally every day learn
Right.
a little bit more about her.
Yeah.
Which he then is able to build and finally
Right.
get to a point where he understands who she is.
But yeah, and that's basically the movie, is him just at first trying to get out of this situation, but then finally just being content with being in it until the end, which, you know.
Yeah. Finally, the very end of the movie,
is that
he wakes up and it's
yeah.
February 3rd.
Right. One of my favorite images in the movie, by the way, is the part where it's the clock. It's after he kind of wakes up and she's there, and then it pans over, and the clock says 6:01 on it instead of 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost like literally a statement of like time has moved
and also
forward,
in that
like,
final one
you know.
that they play the same song again.
Yeah,
which he's literally heard.
And
of
they're
it.
like, "Oh wait,
and like,
crap,
oh, well, we did that yesterday." Well,
yeah, and it's like he's heard it literally for thousands of years, the same song.
Yeah,
that Sonny and Cher song.
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as the cast, we'll go through quickly. We've talked about Bill Murray in the past. I don't feel like we need to add much here.
I think this is one of Bill Murray's both best movies and best performances, and I think why. And this was before his quote Bill Murray gets serious phase of the late 90s, early 2000s. Before he worked with Wes Anderson or Sofia Coppola. But working with somebody he worked a lot with by this point in Harold Ramis, I think this is one of the best Bill Murray performances because it still plays on the Bill Murray of the 80s that most people would know and remember, movie star Bill Murray, but it allows him that personal growth and kind of beats the cynicism out of him and his character by the end just by pure repetition, if nothing else.
Right.
I think a moral of the story of this movie in a lot of ways too is he's not a good guy in the beginning, and just by sheer literally being forced to be patient over all this time, he becomes a good guy.
Yeah,
but it's not something that was naturally going to come to him just by beating it out of him basically over all this time.
That's another interesting thing is the very end, it's kind of the last act, more or less, kind of starts with him trying to basically he has this long conversation with Annie McDowell one night where he's actually convinced her that this is going on by literally saying every single thing that happens, and she basically just inspires him to say, you know what, even though none of this matters and I can't get out of this, I'm just going to start doing nice things for people and saving people from these various problems. The one thing he does fail to do is save that homeless guy from dying. That keeps happening no matter what he does. But he is able to help. There's a kid that falls out of a tree and he helps him, and then there's the Brian Doyle Murray's character's choking on something and he gives him the Heimlich maneuver and saves him, and then also learns piano.
Yeah.
And what's funny is he learns that slowly. But then the woman, every day he comes in more advanced, and she's like, "Oh, well, you're actually really good." And then by the end, she's like, "Oh, he's the best I've ever had," or whatever. And that's what's so funny is you can contain all this with him one day, and then but that by the end he finally decides, that he is actually gonna do good is ultimately, I think, what gets him out of the situation. But it's a really good performance from him, I think. Annie McDowell is Rita Hansen. She is good in pretty much everything I've seen her in. I normally think of her in this and then Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And she was also in St. Elmo's Fire. I forgot about that.
I think she, you know,
she
in
was
general,
Shortcuts too. I forgot about
in
that.
general, she played a lot of roles. I think about her and Michael too, with John Travolta. That, you know, I think part of it's her accent as well. She usually plays very sweet, honorable, happy characters, and you know, again, this fits into Bill Murray's dilemma as a character in terms of what he's playing. Is that I think there's a point where he's, you know, physically attracted to her in the beginning. But then he reaches a point where he's like so put off by everything. And then he enters like this nihilistic phase where none of it matters. And then he goes over the hill and the hump of that and realizes, you know what, since I'm here, why can't I be the best person I can be? And the whole time she's this unchanging person, because literally she's, you know, the same place every day. So I think she acts as a great foil to him in this movie because she's able to be nice but firm with him in terms of all these evolutions he's going through, but she's mostly staying the same. Yeah. And I really can't think of a better actress that could have played this role than her at this moment, because she really checks all the boxes of what this character demands. So she's terrific in this.
Yeah, we'll go through the rest of these a little bit quicker. Chris Elliott. We've talked about him in the past too.
Friend of the pod.
Yeah, he's not in this a whole lot, but he's pretty good. I mean, he's just an idiot guy.
He's the cameraman,
right? But at the end, it's funny when they're like betting on men and everybody, and he goes up there and he's like, "Oh yeah," and like, and everybody's just like looking at him like, "No." Woman gets him for like 25 cents or something. Stephen Tobolowsky is Ned Ryerson.
He's probably one of the most iconic, famous things to come out of this movie, how annoying he is.
Yeah.
And he's like this insurance salesman from his past, Phil's past.
Yeah, and he doesn't really remember him at all.
No. But then it's one of those things like he then builds this one-way relationship with him where he knows everything about him by the end, you know what I mean? And ends up buying all this insurance because he's like, well, it ain't going to matter anyways. I'm just going to restart. Yeah. But then there finally is a February 3rd, so I wonder if he called him back and
he's really annoying, but in a
But I mean, Stephen Tobolowsky's been in tons of things. This is probably one of the things he's most associated with, though. Is this movie.
Test this, you effing quack.
Yeah,
like, you know.
And Memento. It's a test.
Brian Doyle Murray, he's not really in this a whole lot.
He's kind of master of ceremonies over.
Yeah, he's not really in a whole lot of it. Let's see. Yeah, I mean that's the main folks. Rick DeCommon shows up. He's always funny to see anything. He's in The Burbs, is what I normally think him in. But yeah, so that's pretty much
one thing I want to say about just this general premise and idea, or the Groundhog Day itself, which we mentioned in the past. That's our great aunt Sarah, who was like a third grandmother to us. Her birthday was on Groundhog Day, and we used to call her up every year and ask if she saw her shadow, as you know, whether or not we'd get more winter or not. You know, we live in a world that after this movie has existed, you know, can you even think of this holiday and not even think of this movie at least a little bit? I mean, this movie is now so associated with that holiday.
And I mean, I think it was clearly chosen as a joke about this
stupid thing. Imagine having to do this over and over again.
And so that's interesting, I think.
But there is this sense of repetition that I think naturally the premise fits with that day, again, of this thing that we're doing over and over again, and it doesn't seem to have any real immediate meaning. But nonetheless is something that, you know, is being repeated again and again and again and again. And I think the central question of this movie, and I think if you just hear the premise or see the trailer, you wouldn't immediately get this, but seeing the movie multiple times goes again to the point of Bill Murray's character's dilemma. How do I get out of this? What does any of this mean? And then again, after we said he reaches a sense of nihilism where he eventually gets to the point of, you know what, my life should have meaning just outside of this. I'm going to become a better person. I'm going to work on myself, not just in the sense that I'm going to learn an instrument or I'm going to learn French or, you know, I'm going to know and understand this world in a way that no one else does, but I'm going to help people and be a better person just because. If this is my reality, why can't I be the best person I can be? And I think that's a very optimistic, but in its own way, natural progression of
being alive.
You know.
Because I think that's the metaphor, about like we think of our lives as the same thing over and over. You know,
the same people and the same circumstances.
But it's like why? And you think, oh, what's the point of all that? But then it keeps happening, whether you want it to or not. So then, like I said, you have to just eventually come to. And a lot of people don't ever come to that, but those are the people that live forever, I guess, because they're mean. But yeah.
And what connection do you think this has with It's a Wonderful Life? Because that's something I thought about while I was watching it too.
I think that's similar because it's looking at the most basic everyday just aspects of life that we take for granted that happen. In both of those, you get to see, first of all, what would it be like if they didn't? And then the other is, what would it be like if they happen all the time? And it's kind of the opposite, but it's meaning the same thing of you have to take joy in those things because that's what life literally is. Because to these people, this just is a life they've lived once. A day in their life they lived once. You have to keep living it. So it makes you think about that. Like I said, with It's a Wonderful Life, it's literally saying, all right, if you weren't here, here's what life's going to be now. And here's how terrible things are. And, so, I think they're very similar. I never thought about that until you mentioned it.
We didn't really say anything about this as the movie was going on. One thing I think that why this movie's going to hold up over so many years and continue to get better and better is its total disinterest in, quote, solving the mystery of why this is happening. Right. That is never at all real. I mean, he's naturally saying, why is this happening? I don't know. But there's like no MacGuffin to, quote, unlock. I think a movie today would be some stupid Ryan Reynolds Netflix movie that's attempting to do a version of this, and there would be a mystery that has to be solved and unlocks this key that takes us here. Like, that would be the dumb version of 2023 that would be done of this.
It's very Eastern and very Zen, similar almost to what we just talked about with Fearless, about he gets to literally nirvana by being that best person. So it's a very Eastern philosophy in that way of like you have to eventually work and then you can become your best person and then you move on to the next day, in this case. But for him, nirvana is exiting this. But I think that's a metaphor for those kind of ideas about life.
And I'm glad the movie ends when it does, that there's no questioning of what goes on now, because as we talked about, even if it was hundreds of years, right, this all happened, or even decades, 40 years worth of life, let's just say, happened, you would be such a wise and mature soul that even though, quote, life will now move on and continue and you won't know every little thing, you will have such a density of what life is, an understanding of what life is, that there wouldn't be any real, I don't think, regrets or there wouldn't be any major backsliding of that person.
We kind of debated that and both agreed, I think, by the end we were talking about it, is like, you can't go through all that and go back to the person you were. It's just impossible. I mean, you can't be alive that long and you're a totally changed man by that point. Because I mean, even if it was several decades, I mean, he's going to live a few more decades of life, but that's still going to mostly pale in comparison to what he had just experienced as going through all that. And another thing too, to talk about the 90s-ness of this movie, because I was talking about this with Levi. One thing I was thinking about was when I think about 90s comedies, and I actually love both versions of these things, whether it be Coen Brothers-esque dark comedies, or again the kind of the ironicness of the 90s, or whether it be like gross out humor of, say, the Farleys or the Fairleys, which I again love those movies too. What I really love about this is that it's something a lot more heartfelt, and something that, again, it takes a very cynical character who is getting so sick and tired of the same friggin' corny town and the same corny people and the same corny festivities, and going by the end of it, you know what, I'm going to find the beauty in this. I'm not going to be negative. Instead, I'm going to realize that all these people are well-meaning, lovable people, and that they are worthy and deserve my love, and that I should be changed because of that. And that, again, I think legacy-wise, in terms of how this movie fits into the time period it was made in, really is why it endures, and is a movie that can be as deep or as simple surface as you want it to be as you watch it in that way.
I'm not sure if we had quite as much to say about Groundhog Day.
That's
we
been
did,
talked about a lot.
Fearless, but any other things that kind of sum up about
No,
Groundhog
just
Day?
that it I think is one of the best movies I've ever seen to do so much with such a simple kind of idea that you heard in the trailer plays to that whole like, well, he's got a surprise in store, like, you know, that kind of like narration that actually is like really great and actually uses it, because there's been all these movies that have been made since then that are literally this that don't do anything. It's just very much like whatever.
There was the Tom Cruise action movie. Oh gosh, what was the name of it?
Edge of Tomorrow, and then it got renamed as Live, Die, Repeat.
And that movie's not as good as this, but it is a pretty good little action movie that's clever enough. Again, I don't think as good as this is, but I do also think, I don't know a whole lot about the production of this movie, but I think that there's actually a lot of stuff to read about, which I'd actually be interested to do. There was a lot of tensions, between Ramis and Murray as they were making this. Ramis was focused on making a romantic comedy, in direct contrast to Murray's desire to make a more contemplative film. That's another aspect of this we didn't exactly say. It is kind of a romantic comedy in the midst of everything else going on, even though don't exactly think of it in that way. Said Murray, I'd heard this before, was in the middle of a divorce. He was miserable throughout filming, demonstrating erratic behavior through tantrums, and often contradicted Ramis' decisions. So I don't think they really worked together again after this. This kind of was the end of their relationship.
Is that why there's no Ghostbusters 3? No, that's just because Sense found its way into the Ghostbusters oeuvre and was like, no. But, yeah.
So
it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Like,
well, it sounds
like I'm so happy that Dan Aykroyd will one day be dead just to prove that no one is immortal. Okay.
Was he fearless now? I don't know, but we'll find out one day. What if he outlives us? I don't know.
What if Gary Busey has been living the same day over and over all this time, and we didn't know? That's what's wrong with him.
I mean,
he still thinks it's 1982 somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he still thinks it's like late 80s. Did I get the part in Lethal Weapon? Like, he's always living in that reality. He's not sure if he did or not.
Because he was shown the Lethal Weapon show.
Oh, right, yeah.
That was great. Like, yeah.
Wasn't his son in that or something?
I don't know. Probably. I don't know. It's trash.
Anyways, Groundhog Day is not trash. No. Groundhog Day is a very fine film. So that wraps up another episode of Overlapping Dialogue. But don't go away, because Jeff...
Sit down. Sit down.
Imagine Jeff Probst like saying that in the tribal council. Like,
sit down now. Like...
Jeff, what have we got next week?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
Come on, Maggie. Come on, girl.
Hey. What are you guys doing?
We were just going to go on ahead and be by ourselves for a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah. It is our vacation, and we haven't been alone together all that much.
Thought you guys were running out on us.
No,
I think that's exactly what they were doing, Terry.
You're right. We were. It's just not working out between us.
Why's that? Because your son wants to be with me instead of you.
Rourke, come here.
Look, I'm taking my family, and we're going to go down the river alone. That's what we're going to do. I'm sorry. We'll send somebody back to get you.
Who died and made you stud dick all of a sudden, Tom?
Go get in the boat right now. Wade, rangers come down here all the time. You could hook up with one of them and get to Bridle Creek ahead of us.
And what if I said, I'm not going to let you go? What would you do? What would you do, stud?
Hey!
Just gonna talk to him for a second.
I don't want to fight with you, Wade.
Oh.
Wade!
most unexpected
a lot of randomness
duo.
going on there.
One of these movies we have not even seen, but it's got our boy David Strathairn in it. The River Wild from 1994, and another boy, Jack Nicholson, in Wolf, also from 1994. Why these two movies, Levi?
Well, first of all, I'd bought a DVD of The River Wild and wanted to watch it.
Again, we're big Strathairn heads.
We were just like, yeah, let's just do that, along with some movie in 1994. And Wolf we had to pick just because...
Why not?
Wow. We watched this a couple years ago, Wolf, and that's a very simple premise, more or less, about Jack Nicholson is a literary publisher who becomes a werewolf.
I'll never forget, let me just say, the first time this movie was introduced to me in any way, our dear cousin Philip, this is when I was in high school, I get a text, all caps, turn to AMC, Jack Nicholson is a werewolf. And I was like, what? And then I turned it to AMC, sure enough, I see him in a tree jumping around or whatever, and I'm like, and I kept squinting. I was like, "There's no way that's Jack Nicholson."
Yeah.
Indeed, it was Jack Nicholson.
No, but it's literally one of the weirdest movies we've ever seen.
Yeah, because you get to the point when you were talking about what quote weird movies are to most people.
I wrote
versus
a long
what this
review
is.
of this movie, which we'll probably talk more about next week, and it's one of my more prouder reviews I've written. I'll say that. I'm not trying to be on here to self promote or anything, but I
remember reading it and being a really great review.
Just kind of. I think of movies as, people talk about what's a weird movie,
Usually David Lynch.
And it's like David Lynch comes up, or like Andy Warhol stuff, or whatever, Tim Burton, he's weird.
Or a goofy artist.
He is weird, but okay. But when I think of a weird movie, I try to think of something like this, which is the intersection of multiple different strands of ideas.
Yeah.
And multiple different...
They do not immediately associate with each other.
Auteurs and artists coming together in genres to make something wholly original in its weirdness. I think of this movie a lot because it's Mike Nichols, who had been known, at least for a long time, of making a lot of comedy movies or sort of more. I
recently just watched Postcards from the Edge, which is an amazing movie.
Postcards from the Edge, and I'm thinking, which I think every time I.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Yeah, or stuff from the stage, or like different.
He started off obviously as a
comedian.
Yeah, comedian.
And so, but this is something different because it's a horror movie in quotes. I mean, it is a horror movie. I think I shouldn't say that it isn't. But that
it's also like dramatic.
But yeah, and it's shot really well. It looks like $1 million. Like it's one of the best looking movies of the decade.
Also has it has some sort of a relationship, I would say, with the erotic thriller that we talked about in the 80s and 90s.
Of that kind of type of movie. It's all of those things and more, because then it has James Spader as this like weirdo adulterer.
By the way, his follow-up for this was The Birdcage, the big comedy with Nathan Lane and Robin Williams.
Wow.
The Primary Colors after that. That is a movie.
Go look at Wolf again. Isn't it like randomly long or something?
It's 125 minutes.
Oh, never mind.
It
feels longer than that, though, doesn't it? Because and I don't mean that as in it's too long. I just mean it feels like there's a lot going on. Like a lot.
Yeah, and you have Morricone score. Don't
Michelle
forget that.
Pfeiffer's character in this again. I mean, her father. Sorry. Christopher Plummer, that's it. Yeah, it was like Christopher Plummer is the dad in this. But anyway, it's just, we'll talk all more about it next week. A profoundly strange, weird movie.
Perverse
in every way.
Weird way, yeah.
Going back to The River Wild quickly, we haven't seen that, but I do want to talk about it briefly. That's essentially about these people that go on this kind of family, dad, wife, son, that go on this...
Family on a whitewater rafting trip who encounter two violent criminals in the wilderness.
So, and it's like about them trying to get back to wherever.
Kind of survival.
It's kind of like what we... Thing. It's kind of like Deliverance, but with a family, basically.
Yeah.
But, so, I'm actually excited to watch that because Strathairn and...
John C. Reilly also...
Streep and
Kevin Bacon.
And it has the kid from Jurassic Park in it.
Yeah, literally, when the scene that we had in there was the first time we were watching it. Actually, literally everybody in that scene is a known.
Yeah, and I was like, everyone in this scene, literally, it was like, wow. But I mean, maybe maybe we can talk again about Bad Girls Don't Cry, or Big Girls Don't Cry, They Get Even, just because he was in that, I feel like we really got wasted on the matchup of wits of Gregory Dunn, or no, I'm sorry, Griffin Dunn. I was thinking of John Gregory Dunn, his uncle. Griffin Dunn and David Strathairn. Like, we really got cheated out of that in that movie.
That should have been...
We didn't even need a good movie. We just needed them to really, have a problem.
It would be good if they were like...
we needed them to have a laugh, you know what I mean?
Those two need to be in a buddy comedy of some sort. But, time travel in the 90s and do it then. Now, you can do that.
Yeah, it's all right. But it would be very, going in style.
Yeah.
We're old, and we've got to race to our colonoscopy. Or something like... I don't know. But.
So, the connection between these movies, we'll see. Essentially, from 2 weeks out, we're looking at, it's kind of a take a walk on the wild side kind of, vibe, that they both share.
It's going to be wild.
Any final thoughts on anything?
No. School's over for a little while.
You know what? We got to play the song "School's Out for Summer" here at the end.
Do we have to?
I think we do. Because I've said it now.
Yeah,
so now it's got to do it.
Crap. Because I literally heard it yesterday. Because they always play that every year at the end of I'm even a minor Alice Cooper fan.
I'm not a big fan. He seemed like a cool guy in general. I'll say
his
that.
music I'm all right enough.
He had a collab with Jake the Snake Roberts at one point.
Feed My Frankenstein is not that great. But anyway, got out of breath from that one.
Like I said, he had a collab with Jake the Snake.
I already heard that song, but you haven't. So here, unless you just happened to be there yesterday.
I was not. I was in Newton, North Carolina.
But anyway, or a week ago. When you're hearing this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyways, this is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless. And enjoy your summer.
And feed that Frankenstein, with that summer gum.
Cause they found new toys.
Bye.